Welcome to Shredder Fanfic. Like, subscribe, and hype video. Join members to gain early access to new videos. After the main character dies, he gets reborn inside of Invincible. He soon finds out he has a recalibrated Omnitrix. What will somebody with the powers of the Omnitrix do inside of Invincible? What will change? With the recalibrated Omnitrix, what aliens will he use? Will he get more aliens like Ultramites?
The bridge between the cortical image and the clone's digital cortex. Rewired the neurointegration timer to align on real-time synchronicity. Created a transient lockout of motor control in the new body until the transfer completed and terminated the original node's consciousness seamlessly, erasing redundancy at the moment of completion. The machine purred. "I'll be honest," one Mahler muttered. "We hadn't considered a latency correction loop that elegant." The other grunted. "I had. But not with that kind of clock discipline." I ignored them. The final line blinked green. I turned to Rex. "It's ready." He hesitated. Just for a breath. Because even men like Rex, arrogant, self-obsessed, reckless, know when they're about to cross a line that rewrites the rest of their life. "You're sure?" he asked. "No one's ever done it cleaner," I said. "Once your mind is moved, there won't be a you left to doubt it. Just the new one. And it will be you." He stared at the clone's face. It looked peaceful. Too peaceful. "Do it," he said. I pressed the trigger. The machine hissed. Lights blinked in cascading green. The tube's interior glowed with a faint neural shimmer, like a pulse beating in silence. The real Rex convulsed once. Not violently. Just a single twitch. Like a heartbeat catching. Then his body slumped. Chest still. Eyes open. But empty. No scream. No drama. Just stillness. The pod cracked open. And the new Rex stepped out. Younger. Fresher. Wearing the same expression. Same scowl. Same sarcastic flicker in his eyes. "Still me," he said, flexing one hand. "Feels weird. But, right. You'll need calibration," I said. "Motor response, memory recall, emotional reconnection. It's not magic. It's science. And you just walked through a door that can't be closed." The younger Rex grinned. "Good. I don't like looking back anyway." He turned to the Maulers. "Get me my gear. I've got a reputation to reforge." The Maulers nodded. They liked him more like this. Less weary. More impulsive. More useful. I slid off the console. "You owe me," I said, already dialing the Omnitrix again. He raised an eyebrow. "Big time. Then remember that. Because favors like this don't come cheap." He didn't reply. I vanished in green light before he could. Back in my room, human again, I stared out the window. The sky was quiet. I wondered if Eve knew yet. Wondered if it mattered. Because the Rex she had known was gone. And the one walking around now? He remembered everything. But didn't carry the weight. And that was the most dangerous version of him yet. Chapter 33, Stars Don't Heal Scars. It was late when she knocked. Not midnight late. Later. That hollow hour where the sky outside my window had stopped pretending to be night and started practicing dawn, and everything between street lamps felt like memory and afterthought. I opened the door slowly. Eve. Her hair was damp like she'd showered too long. She didn't smile. Just stood there, hands tucked into her hoodie, gaze flicking up at me like she'd rehearsed this moment a few times before showing up. "Hey," she said. I nodded. "Hey. You busy?" I shrugged. "No. Not really." She hesitated. Then exhaled, voice light but tight. "You want to go out?" I blinked. out. Just a walk. Or food. Something that isn't sitting alone thinking about how much everything sucks. I hesitated not because I didn't want to go, but because I did, and I could already feel the weight behind her words pressing through her skin like bruises looking for air. "All right," I said. "Give me 2 minutes." The cafe was a hole-in-the-wall place just shy of the city's edge. Dim lighting. Real booths. The kind of silence that made people lean closer instead of talking louder. She ordered tea. I ordered nothing. We didn't talk at first. She didn't ask questions. Neither did I. Then she spoke. "He lied to me for a month," she said. "And I don't even care about the cheating anymore. Not really. Not the act of it. It's the lie." Every time I looked him in the eye, he looked back and smiled like I was enough. Like he didn't already have an escape hatch in his pocket. I watched her fingers tighten around the cup. "It makes you feel stupid," she said. "Like everyone else saw it coming except you. Like the one person who was supposed to be on your side was really the one memorizing where to stab." I didn't interrupt. Didn't nod. Didn't offer a single word. Because that wasn't what she needed. Not from me. She needed someone still enough to talk to. She kept going, voice quieter now. "And part of me wants to forget it. Move on. Find something better. You know." Her eyes flicked up. "Someone better." That pause. That pivot. The one where the monologue becomes an offer. An open door with no handle on the inside. I leaned back slightly. Let the silence between us stretch just long enough to be kind. Then said, gently, "Eve. You're bleeding and trying to kiss someone through the wound." She blinked. "I'm not judging," I said. "I get it. You need a new chapter. You want something that isn't him. But I'm not a placeholder. I don't do rebound. And I sure as hell don't want to be your way of forgetting what it felt like to be lied to." Her eyes dropped. The color drained a little from her face, not insulted. Just sobered. "I didn't mean to." "I know," I said, standing slowly. "You didn't. But you need to deal with what Rex did. On your own. Without using someone else to skip the hard part." I left enough on the table to cover the tea. She didn't follow. Home was cold. Quieter than it should have been. I didn't sit. Didn't collapse. Didn't reflect. I opened the Omnitrix. Dialed without hesitation. Alien X. The universe shifted. Gravity inverted. The floor folded into the cosmos. I thought of him, of blood and bone and satisfaction. And I teleported. I landed in the sky of a dead world. No cities. No clouds. Just broken mountains and a violet moon cracked open above me like a wound in the sky. He was already there. Battle beast. Leaning against a cliffside, arms crossed, claws drumming lightly against the stone. When he saw me, his grin opened like a scar. "You again." I let Alien X dissolve into light and reformed as diamond head crystal armor refracting the dead planet's starlight across a million mirrored facets. "Yeah," I said. "You wanna fight or monologue?" He straightened. His tail twitched once. "Both." Then he charged. The impact shattered stone and sky alike. I blocked his first strike with my forearm crystal, fracturing along the edges but holding. He pivoted fast, tail whipping up like a barbed lash. I ducked, countered with a spiked elbow aimed at his ribs, and met nothing but air. He'd already twisted above me. A claw raked down my back. Pain laced through me, but I didn't stop. I let the kinetic momentum pull me forward, flipped, and drove a shard blade from my wrist up into his shoulder. Blood hit my face hot, heavy, real. Battle Beast roared with laughter. He shoved me back, fangs bared, eyes bright. You hit like a warrior today, he shouted. Not a tactician. Not a thinker. A killer. I'm adapting, I said, breath cold against my teeth. He grinned wider. Then let's keep going until one of us forgets what it means to bleed. And we did. Fist to fist. Blow for blow. Cracking the bones of the world beneath us. Because sometimes the only way to forget pain is to become something that causes it better than anyone else. And tonight, on a planet no one remembered, I remembered who I was becoming. Chapter 34, Crystals and Claws. The mountain cracked beneath our feet. Stone groaned under the pressure of momentum and violence, each tremor echoing through the hollow world like a heartbeat trapped inside dying rock. There was no sun above us, only the fractured violet moon casting shattered light across our shoulders, turning every breath into steam and every motion into shadow. Battle Beast stood 3 paces away, blood dripping slowly from a shallow wound at his shoulder, staining the pale fur that coiled around his neck like a mantle of war. His chest rose and fell with hunger, not exhaustion. I felt it too. Diamond Head's form hummed with rage held in perfect lattice. Crystal regeneration was already pushing new plates across my ribs, where his tail had caught me with a glancing strike 10 seconds earlier. He grinned. No tricks this time. I raised both fists. Just fists. He moved. The ground exploded. I threw the first punch, sharp and clean, a piston of compressed crystal aimed at his temple. He caught it mid-air, claws digging into the smooth facet of my knuckles, and twisted, dragging me into his knee. I braced. Took the impact to my side, let the outer armor crack just enough to absorb the force, then drove my elbow into his neck with a snapping torque that forced him back. He retaliated instantly. His claws tore toward my chest. I pivoted, letting the strike scrape along my forearm, and brought my other hand up in a crushing arc, slamming a jagged uppercut into his jaw. Blood flew. He didn't slow. His head snapped back, but his arm came with it, and the next punch landed squarely on my face, sending me flying backward into the side of a broken cliff. Rock shattered around me, embedding into my armor, smoke billowing from the point of impact. I burst out of the dust a half-second later, sprinting. No waiting. No plan. Just speed and rage. He met me halfway. Fist met fist in the air, raw power slamming together so hard the pressure wave cratered the ground below. The stone split open, revealing molten veins underneath the planet's crust. We didn't fall. We flew backward from the recoil. Then we came back again. I ducked his next swing, brought both hands down on the back of his neck like hammers, and forced him to the ground. He rolled, grabbed my leg, and threw me into a jagged outcropping that shattered under the impact. I coughed dust and drove my heel into his face as he lunged, crystal edge slicing across his cheekbone. He laughed. Blood spilled across his fangs. He grabbed my shoulder, pulled me in, and head-butted me so hard my vision exploded in white. My crystal cracked down the left side of my face. I stumbled. His fist caught me in the gut before I could recover, lifting me off the ground. I hit the dirt 2 meters away, coughing, reeling, hands dug into the scorched sand. His voice came low, hoarse, elated. You fight like you want to die, boy. I stood again. Wiped blood from my mouth. No, I said, and my voice hit the air like iron. I fight like I'm already tired of living. He roared. Charged. I sprinted to meet him. We collided again, this time, no finesse. No techniques. Just fists smashing into ribs, jaws, armor, bone. I blocked one strike, barely, then responded with a hammer fist that dented his thigh and dropped him for half a second. He kicked me in the side, a full roundhouse, and I felt my rib plating splinter. I turned it into a grapple, pulled him into a headlock, and kneed him in the face 3 times before he slipped free, bleeding and laughing again. "Yes," he bellowed, voice echoing across the skyless crater. "This is what your world lacks. Rage without speech. Combat without cause." I didn't respond. I crushed my foot down on a fallen shard of crystal, kicked it up into my hand, and drove it straight into his shoulder where his armor was weakest. He screamed. Fury this time, not joy. He grabbed my wrist before I could pull back, twisted it with enough force to dislocate the whole arm from its socket, then brought his clawed elbow down on my neck and knocked me to the ground. I coughed, crystal flickering. Systems inside the Omnitrix buzzed with distress feedback loop alert, signal strain, form nearing overload. I didn't care. I surged upward and tackled him with my one good arm, bringing us both down into the cracked ground below. We rolled, grappling in dust and ruin. I slammed my head into his 3 times. He bit into my shoulder. I drove my knee into his ribs until something broke. He gasped but didn't yield. We were animals. Champions. Gods pretending to be men, men pretending to be monsters. The ground beneath us split, molten light flickering like a second sky. We fell into it. We landed in lava glow. Both of us half dead, smoke rising from skin and stone. I stood first, staggered forward, body bent at the waist, broken ribs knitting slowly. My chest rose and fell like a furnace. Battle Beast pulled himself upright, snarling, eyes wild, one eye swollen nearly shut. He wiped blood from his face. "Still standing," he rasped. I nodded once. "Still ready?" He laughed again, weak now. "Honest." Then sat down, legs crossed. "No victory," he muttered. "Not today." I stood over him a moment longer. Then sat down across from him, crystal dissolving slowly into raw light. Neither of us spoke for a while. The planet pulsed around us. Not peace, but silence. Earned the hard way. Chapter 35, The Horns We Inherit. I returned from that ruined world in silence. Alien X shimmered into being, and the broken planet with its fractured moons and the scent of molten ash fell behind me like a closing wound. The moment I crossed back into Earth's orbit, I let the transformation dissolve, light cascading down my body like ash shaken from a coat. The instant my boots touched down on my bedroom floor, I was just me again. But the pain lingered. The memory of fists against my face, the sensation of Battle Beast's claws splitting crystal like wet paper, the sound of blood hitting stone. I didn't feel fear. I didn't feel anger. I felt insufficient. And I hated that. The next morning came like it always did, unimpressed by whatever blood I'd spilled the night before. I blended back into routine, clean clothes, unremarkable breath, the same walk through the same hallways where no one knew what I had done. Not even Mark. Especially not Mark. I met him outside the school gates, a calm nod exchanged between us. "Yo," he said. "How's it going?" "Still standing," I answered. "You?" He gave a faint grin. "Exhausted. But good." That was when I noticed Amber. She was leaning against the wall by the school doors, arms crossed, pink earbuds around her neck, half smile curling as Mark approached. I watched his expression shift. Slight softening. Noted the way he glanced at her, then back at me, and scratched the back of his head. "You guys are dating now?" I asked flatly. Mark blinked. "What?" "Oh, yeah. We've been hanging out. A bit more now." Amber waved as we passed. "Hey, new guy. Shredder, right?" I gave her a lazy half salute. "That's me." "What gave it away, the name or the disposition?" Mark coughed a laugh. She smiled, and the three of us walked to lunch. William was already at the table when we arrived, sipping from a juice box like he wasn't watching the entire hallway for something to entertain him. He raised an eyebrow at Amber's appearance but didn't say anything. Mark did the introductions, and the four of us fell into a lazy rhythm of talking about everything and nothing. School gossip. Weird science homework. What the hell the flaxen attacks actually meant for people who didn't wear capes. 10 minutes in, Eve showed up. She walked straight past Rex without looking at him, her tray tucked neatly under her arm. Her eyes found me immediately. She didn't smile, but she sat beside me. It was quiet for a beat. Then William made a joke about the vending machines being rigged, and Eve rolled her eyes. The table relaxed. For a little while, we were just kids again. No powers. No grief. Just the illusion of normal. It was nice. But illusions don't last. After school, I walked home alone. Mark offered to hang out, but I told him I had homework. He didn't push. By the time I closed the front door behind me, the Omnitrix was already warming. My mind was moving too fast, too deep. I'd had the idea for weeks now, rooted in half-remembered speculation and fragments of theoretical design, but only now did I feel the burn strong enough to act on it. I stripped off my outer shirt, dropped my bag, and crossed the floor to the workbench. A holographic schematic hovered above a sliver of captured tissue, Alien X blood, still preserved in stasis from a recent transformation. It was black. Blacker than black. Reflective like obsidian, and yet absorbing light entirely. I stared into it. Then turned into grey matter. The shift was instant. Mind exploding outward, synapses accelerating, perception bending into clarity. My fingers moved before I spoke. Instruments whirred to life. Genetic splicing, celestial residue filtering, biometric template storage, every tool at my disposal now pointed toward one goal. Recreate Alien X. Not just duplicate the form. Clone it. Build an independent copy from raw material. And then eventually absorb it. The reason? It had nothing to do with power greed. It had everything to do with horns. I remembered the forums. The fan theory deep dives from years ago. Ben Tennyson's Alien X had 3 horns rising from his celestial skull. Each horn, a symbol, each one tied to a consciousness: Serena, Bellicus, Ben. 3 voices. 3 minds sharing the body. And my Alien X? No horns. Not one. And when I transformed, there was no Serena. No Bellicus. No shared control. Just me. That's why I wasn't as strong. Why my form lacked that terrifying cosmic omnipotence Ben used to stop entire timelines. No inner council. No cosmic debate. Just one voice, one thread of will. Alone. And if the horns symbolized the minds inside, then maybe adding more horns, more consciousnesses would make me stronger. Not personalities. Copies. Of me. I could generate more of myself, stitch their minds into the pattern, and stabilize them under my dominance. Like shattering myself into pieces, then reforging them into a single, multi-horned blade. The first step: generate a stable second Alien X body, fully formed but unlinked. Second, integrate its mind structure with mine. Third, test for horn development. If successful, I would build more. Until I had 3. Until I could stand among stars and know I was no longer beneath Ben. No longer a shadow. But a storm. I worked for hours. Tweaked sequences. Calibrated interdimensional genome paths. Ran simulations. Then when everything was ready, I dialed the Omnitrix again. Transformed into Alien X one more time. And with steady, burning precision, I took a small needle. and drew my own blood. Chapter 36, measured in drops. The next morning, I moved through the city like a shadow dressed in cheap clothes. Nothing in my posture suggested power. I slouched just enough to be ignored, spoke just loud enough to be remembered as polite, and kept my hands out of my pockets to avoid suspicion. Because today, I needed things. Materials. Components. Steel. Copper. Composite gels. Pressure-tempered bioglass. I needed them not from a black market arms dealer or an alien scrapyard orbiting Saturn, but from my local city market. A dozen alleys twisted around the industrial district like neglected arteries, and down in the merchant lanes where high school students never walked and repairmen never asked for ID, I found what I needed. Gray matter handled the rest. I transformed into the galvan at the edge of the loading docks and slipped into a maintenance grate. From there, it was a straight crawl across half-rusted piping into the basement clearance area. Vendors milled about in semi-legal booths, selling stripped drone cores and hydraulic jacks still faintly humming from stress discharge. And none of them suspected the tiny figure in the hoodie with two sharp eyes and two steady fingers. Not when I calculated weight load tolerances for high-density containment gel by smell. Not when I bartered with 2 fingers and half an equation about magnetic resonance curves. I walked out of there with a gravity-stabilized growth pod casing, 3 mid-tier neurointerface plates, a pressure-sealed blood reservoir unit, and a fluid recycler. I talked a half-senile warehouse guard into calling broken plumbing stock. Total cost? $2,347.28. I paid in cash. Left the coins. Didn't look back. Back home, I locked the front door, closed all the blinds, and dumped the parts on my bedroom floor like I was building something illegal, which I kind of was. But not in any way they'd ever find in a database. I transformed again gray matter and started. Piece by piece, a vertical pod took shape. Not a cloning vat in the traditional sense, but a developmental echo chamber, something that could stabilize Alien X's unique DNA in inert stasis, reconstruct neurological pathways in real time, and house the emergent consciousness under constant observation. I calibrated pressure ratios. Set the temperature at optimal celestial embryogenesis thresholds. Triple-checked the viscomagnetic feed tubes. The result was crude, ugly, functional. And unexpectedly it could house 3 units simultaneously. I didn't plan for that. Didn't build for it. But the machine recognized patterns in the DNA as I fed in the sample my blood, and it self-corrected. Adapted. As if the data was recursive. Reflective. Intelligent. Alien X wasn't just a transformation. It was a framework. A mind waiting to be refracted. And I was going to turn that reflection into a chorus. I sat back on my desk chair, gray matter form still active, legs swinging off the edge. Commence replication, I muttered. The machine purred. 1 chamber filled first. A slow, pulsing glow. I watched my blood spiral through the filtration coils, micro-quantum adjustments shaping it cell by cell. 1 minute, 36 seconds. I timed it. And wrote it down. Average blood flow rate during replication equals 17.3 ml/section. Did that matter? Probably not. But I logged it anyway. I recorded everything. Temperature fluctuations in tank 3, plus 0.04 degrees C. Vibration feedback when 2 chambers ran simultaneously, audible but non-resonant. Color of embryonic fluid shift from midnight black to slate gray at 42% cellular density. Was any of this relevant? Maybe. Maybe not. But if I was wrong, if my theory about the horns, the multiplicity of consciousness, the strength of Alien X being tied to internal plurality, then this data would help me find out why. This wasn't a weapon. Not yet. This was a method. A theory given shape and heartbeat. I stared at the pods a little too long. The silent movement of proto-bodies slowly coalescing in the dark. The machine was working. And for the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't felt in so long. I almost forgot what it was. Pride. Not the showy kind. Not power. Progress. The pods hissed gently in the dark. My notes spilled across the desk like a scientist in a storm. I changed back into myself. Folded the blanket over my shoulders. Collapsed onto the bed. And as the soft, humming sound of cellular genesis filled the corners of my room, I let sleep take me. Not afraid. Not even eager. Just ready. Because tomorrow, I wouldn't be alone in my head. Tomorrow, the work would begin. Chapter 37, The Children of the Cosmos. I woke to silence, but not the kind I expected. The humming of the pod was gone. I sat up slowly, eyes still bleary, and felt a strange stillness in the air. Not absence. Not malfunction. Something completed. The moment I crossed the room and laid eyes on the containment unit, I understood. The pods were open. 3 tiny, hovering figures hovered just inches above the floor. Each one looked exactly like Alien X star, black skin dotted with shifting constellations, white armor-like plating around their chests and forearms, smooth-featured faces without mouths but with eyes that shimmered like they were pulled straight from the edge of existence. Only they were small. Child-sized. No taller than my knee. Their limbs were slightly disproportionate, floating more than walking, their motions wobbling with a dreamlike fragility. Their bodies were whole, but their development, stunted. I'd made a critical miscalculation. These weren't fully matured forms. They were in an embryonic plateau suspended between perfect design and incomplete synthesis. The data stream hadn't fed them enough to grow beyond the baseline framework. I had thought the blood alone would be sufficient. It wasn't. They needed input. Food, knowledge, psychic structuring, exposure to dimensionally scaled mass energy. They needed what infants needed. And they were staring at me. One blinked. The smallest. Another floated up to my hand. The third was tilting its head toward the ceiling, silent, as if hearing the spin of galaxies through the plaster. I crouched, carefully. Hey there! They blinked again. The one closest to me buzzed softly, tilting forward like it wanted to speak. But before anything else. Knock knock. I froze. Yo, Shredder. Mark's voice rang out, cheerful and unaware. You alive in there? Eve's voice followed a second later. You didn't show at breakfast. We brought food. Panic is a funny thing. Most days I don't feel it. But today, I swept 3 floating baby Alien X copies into the nearest closet like they were pets I wasn't supposed to have, shoved a blanket over the remnants of the pod, and tried to smooth my hair down in the hallway mirror all in 5 seconds. Too slow. The door opened. Mark stepped in with a bag of something greasy in one hand and a soda in the other. Eve was right behind him. I stood in front of the closet, grinning like a hostage in a toothpaste commercial. Morning, guys. Mark blinked. Are you hiding something? Definitely not, I said. Just doing some reorganizing. The smallest Alien X clone floated out from under the door like a dust bunny with stars for eyes. Mark stared. Okay, now you're definitely hiding something. I sighed, rubbed my temples, and made a snap decision. They're aliens. Mark frowned. Yeah. I got that. I mean, I said, carefully shaping the lie, they're part of a species that recently contacted me. I offered to mentor them. Help them integrate. Mark's eyebrows rose. You're teaching aliens. Someone has to, I said. Can't just let them float around aimlessly. They're young, Mark. They need structure. Eve narrowed her eyes, stepping forward, voice calm but probing. What kind of species are they? They don't have a name I can translate, I said smoothly. But they respond to me. Eve glanced at the smallest one, who was now peeking at her from behind the dresser. They're cute, she muttered. But, weird. Exactly why I need to do this alone, I said quickly. They're fragile, metaphysically speaking. If you interact too much, you might destabilize their psychic structure. No offense. Mark nodded slowly. That makes zero sense, but I trust you. Eve wasn't convinced. Can I just look at it? No, I cut in, faster than intended. I mean seriously. No. It's not safe. Mark put a hand on her shoulder. Come on, Eve. He's got it. Let's go help Rex get his face broken during training. She rolled her eyes but let him pull her away. Fine. But if one of them eats your wall, I'm not fixing it. Duly noted, I said. They left. I closed the door and locked it. Twice. The room fell silent again. I turned back toward the closet, exhaled, and opened it slowly. The 3 copies floated out cautiously. All 3 now hovered with more awareness, their movement less erratic. Their eyes stayed locked on me. The tallest one floated forward. It opened its mouth. It had a mouth now. Probably self-formed during partial awareness. The voice that came out was distant, echoing, like a whisper whispered by a star. Are you our father? I froze. The middle one floated up beside it, mimicking the first. Daddy. The smallest blinked again. Day. I stared. No script. No protocol. No warning. This wasn't what I designed them for. But something pulled at the corner of my mind, the instinct to command versus the instinct to care. If they thought I was their father, it gave me control. Loyalty. And better, a trio of godlike beings who loved me than ones who didn't understand why they existed. I knelt again. Yes, I said, slowly. I am. All 3 of them glowed brighter. Good, said the tallest. I stood, flicked the dial, and became Alien X again. With a thought, I manifested books. 1,000 of them. Every known language, physics, psychology, history, ethics, mathematics, cosmic structure. Then I made more, a library that grew as they read, with infinite shelves extending into pocket folds of dimension. I pointed. Read everything. They didn't speak. They absorbed. Book after book dissolved into light as they consumed it. 1 second per book. Maybe less. Their minds expanded visibly. Vocabulary shifted in real time. Thought formed in waves. They would be stronger. Smarter. Everything I wasn't yet. But they'd call me father. And for now. That would keep them loyal. Chapter 38, Loyalty is Learned. A week passed. 7 days of quiet construction, hidden beneath the mundane rhythm of civilian life. I woke each morning as myself, went to school, talked with Mark and Eve, laughed at William's jokes, acted as though nothing was brewing beneath the surface. But every evening, after my door locked and the curtains fell, I became something else. I became their teacher. Alien X. My 3 children know, my 3 constructs grew in silence and brilliance. Not much taller, not physically older. But in their minds, they no longer floated aimlessly through rooms like drifting stars. Now, they spoke. They reasoned. They asked questions. Calculated. Memorized. Analyzed. They read thousands of volumes. I brought more by the hour. I ordered crates of physical books, manuals, doctrines, philosophy texts. I made them hold paper, turn pages, feel the weight of knowledge instead of absorbing it as raw code. Among the books were others hand-picked texts about loyalty, obedience, attachment. Parables on kings and their knights. Stories of fathers and sons. Oaths. Bonds. Self-sacrifice. I read them aloud at night, voice low, even when I knew they had already memorized every word. Who do you protect? I asked them every night. You, Daddy, they replied, in unison. What do you never do? Never lie to Daddy. Never hurt Daddy. Never betray Daddy. They were learning. Not just how to be strong, but how to be mine. On the 8th day, the sky tore open. It began with a boom. Not thunder. Not construction. But something else. Something wrong. I stood at the window, already dialing the Omnitrix, already feeling the hum of energy crawl up my spine like instinct. Then the second boom came, louder, sharper. I flung open the window. Far in the sky, two blurs slammed against each other with enough force to crack the clouds. A smear of red and white. A smear of yellow and blue. Mark. Nolan. It was happening. Too soon. They weren't ready. But maybe, ready enough. I turned, crouched, and called softly, "Come here, boys." 3 streaks of shimmering black slipped from the shadows, my alien X-triplets now glowing faintly with inner light, constellations drifting lazily beneath their semi-transparent skin. They hovered inches off the floor, silent until I spoke. They stood before me. I knelt, arms open, voice gentle but firm. "Come to Daddy." They floated close. "You see up there?" I pointed toward the sky. "The man in white and red. The one flying fast." 3 heads turned in sync. "Yes, Daddy," said the tallest. I pointed again. "And the one in yellow and blue?" "Yes, Daddy," the smallest said, already pulsing slightly brighter. "That one, Mark, he's my friend." "That means he's your friend?" They nodded. No hesitation. "The red and white one is hurting him. But I don't want that one killed, do you understand?" "Yes, Daddy," they said again, their voices like distant bells echoing through a void. "You're going to go up there and help Mark. Protect him. Don't let him get hurt." The second one, shorter than the first, taller than the third, tilted his head. "Should we fight the red and white one?" "Yes. But do not kill him. If you do," I paused, "I'll be very, very angry." They looked at one another, and for a moment, their shared telepathy flared. "We will protect Mark," the eldest said. "We will not kill," said the second. "We will make Daddy proud," said the third. "Go," I said. "Make him proud." They vanished, streaks of starlight screaming toward the sky. I didn't follow. This wasn't about me stepping in. This was their test. Their first real lesson. High above the city, Omni-Man's fist drove into Mark's side, cracking ribs with a sickening crunch. Mark wheezed, coughed blood, and flailed mid-air, barely stopping himself from crashing into the top of an office building. He looked up, blinking through pain. And 3 alien beings appeared out of nowhere. Glowing black. Shifting like cosmic ghosts. Eyes full of stars. Mark blinked again, dazed. "You, guys, wait, I've seen you before." From Shredder's room. The tallest floated forward. "Shredder is away right now." Mark furrowed his brow. "Away? Where?" "Unimportant. We are here now." The second flew past Mark like a comet, slamming into Nolan's back with enough force to send the Viltrumite spiraling forward through several feet of open air. Nolan stopped himself mid-spin, eyes wide for half a second. The third twin struck next, a sweeping arc of cosmic energy that clipped Nolan's shoulder and sent shockwaves across the cloud line. Mark could only watch, stunned, as the three alien children surrounded his father with impossible speed. "Who the hell are you?" Nolan growled, jaw tight, voice not shaken but interested now. "We are shredders," said the tallest. And then they attacked again. Their fists weren't as strong. Their bodies not as dense. But they did not stop. They overwhelmed with momentum, spatial bending, bursts of microgravity. They took hits and adapted. Dodged better each time. One screamed into existence behind Nolan's blind spot just as another struck low, keeping him pinned in reaction, not domination. Mark joined in, emboldened by their arrival. And for the first time, Nolan found himself defending instead of dictating. Far below, I watched from the rooftop, hidden in shadows. No one noticed me. Not Cecil. Not Eve. Not the satellites. And as the battle danced across the sky, I whispered to myself, "Good. Let them see. Let them all see. My sons don't obey gravity. They obey me." And they were just getting started. Chapter 39, 3 stars against 1. The sky was no longer sky. It was broken, trembling, alive with streaks of celestial energy and the distant, sharp clash of raw force. The clouds hung shredded above the city skyline, torn open like parchment, glowing with the aftershock of every impact. And at the heart of it all, Nolan Grayson, Omni-Man, blood-flecked and gritting his teeth, was slowing down. Not from age. Not from hesitation. From resistance. 3 blurs moved around him now, not indistinct like Mark's flight, or brutish like a Flaxen's clumsy charge. No, these were different. Purposeful. Precise. The alien X-triplets fought like they were born knowing how. Not with brute force, though they had more than enough. But with coordination. Flow. Strategy. Each one complemented the next. When Nolan struck one across the face, the second flew under his guard to slam a blow against his ribs. When he turned to retaliate, the third looped around his back and clipped his heels. They weren't trying to kill. Just control. Exhaust. Wear him down. And they were succeeding. Below them, Mark was slowing too, floating mid-air, chest heaving, eyes wide, barely keeping up with the speed of the fight. He wasn't fighting anymore. He was watching. Watching his father, a man who could collapse cities and level armies, get outmaneuvered. Outpaced. Outshined. The tallest twin, the one Mark remembered most from the time he peeked into my room, delivered a crisp backhand across Nolan's jaw that sent the Viltrumite flipping backward, caught by a second twin's gravity warping field before he could recover. Then, softly, as if bored, that same twin turned to look at Mark. "You okay?" Mark flinched at the question. What even are you guys?" The third twin, the smallest, hovered up next to him, blinking bright, glowing with childlike innocence and raw cosmic force. "We are our father's sons." "Shredder?" Mark asked. His voice cracked. They didn't answer. Instead, they smiled. And returned to the fight. Far above, Nolan snarled through gritted teeth, slamming both fists into the chest of the middle twin. The strike sent a burst of shockwave through the upper stratosphere, bending the clouds into a spiral, but the twin barely flinched. Instead, he caught Nolan's arm. Twisted. Brought him down. A sonic boom cracked through the sky as Nolan hit the edge of the troposphere, tumbling through his own momentum, caught again mid-fall by another twin who simply gripped him by the throat and held him still, hovering, as if judging him. The look in Nolan's eyes was pure disbelief. He wasn't losing because he was weaker. He was losing because he was alone. And for the first time in his life, Omni-Man was being toyed with. Somewhere deep beneath the Pentagon, in a cold bunker lined with more cameras than walls, Cecil Stedman stared at the feed. Donald was pale. "Is that Alien X?" Cecil said slowly. "3 of them. Younger. Built like they were manufactured but fighting like they were born for it." Donald cleared his throat. "Sir, are we watching Viltrumite defeat?" Cecil didn't answer. He leaned closer to the screen as Nolan stumbled mid-air again, his lip bleeding, left arm not responding the way it should, and one of the alien children flew through him, phasing just enough to avoid friction, then reforming to deliver a wave of kinetic energy that sent Nolan crashing backward in a spiral. Donald muttered, "That one just broke physics." "They're not just strong," Cecil said. "They're coordinated. They don't share DNA with Viltrumites. But if one of them is Shredder's, and Shredder made the others." He turned toward the console. "Send a file to the lab. Cross-reference all data. If they can hold their own against Omni-Man, we need to find out what planet they're from. Or what lab. And if they're loyal." Donald asked. Cecil's eyes narrowed. "They're children. But if they're loyal to Shredder?" Cecil didn't speak. He was already wondering the same thing. Across town, in a 2-story house on a quiet block, Debbie Grayson stood in her living room, frozen. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the edge of the couch, eyes glued to the muted television. The feed flickered with shaky aerial footage, news helicopters capturing streaks of impossible energy slamming through the clouds. One blur of red and white, flashing erratically. 3 pulses of black and white light, hovering around it in graceful precision. She recognized the man in the center. Recognized the cape. The mask. The stance. Nolan. And he was losing. To something that looked inhuman. Something that shouldn't have even existed on this planet. Something that fought like a god and moved like a child. Her lip trembled. Up above, the triplets had started to slow down. Not from exhaustion. From control. They were pulling punches now. Dodging with more room. Letting Nolan swing. Letting him see just how hopeless it was. They were toying with him. The second twin tilted his head mid-fight. "You're slower now." Nolan's breath caught. The third said, "We thought Viltrumites were stronger." The first floated just a bit higher. "Or is our daddy just better?" And for the first time, Omni-Man looked afraid. On the rooftop, I stood still. Watching the battle like a man watching his shadow stretch. They weren't even finished growing. And already, they were gods. And they called me father. I didn't smile. Didn't move. Just whispered, under my breath. "Good." Chapter 40, When Stars Return. They could have ended it. They hovered there, 3 pieces of the void, each shimmering like a fracture in space, watching Nolan Grayson bleed and hover, his chest heaving and eyes wide, unable to mask the deep, bruising ache beneath the facade of stoic resolve. They had tested him. Measured him. Matched his tempo and then surpassed it. Again. And again. And again. But then, they stopped. The youngest floated back first. No final blow, no mocking farewell, just the simple, weightless drift of a child turning from a game that no longer challenged them. The others followed, a slow orbit falling inward, regrouping around each other. One of them turned to Mark, who was floating nearby, blood dripping from his mouth, half-conscious, barely holding on to altitude. "You'll be okay," the middle one said. "We didn't let him hit you again." Mark stared, unfocused. "Where's Shredder?" "Home," the eldest answered simply. "We're done here." Then they were gone, 3 streaks of black and white slipping across the sky like meteor trails in reverse. My POV. I heard them arrive before I saw them. The air shimmered. A faint ripple of displaced gravity trembled along the edges of my windowpane, and then the room lit briefly in cold, glowing light. They hovered just inside the threshold. No announcement. No bragging. No injuries. No fear. Just the return of children who had seen war, and chosen to leave it behind. I stepped forward. "Did you do what I asked?" I asked quietly. They nodded. "Did you hurt him?" The youngest shook his head. "Not much." "Did you help Mark?" "We stopped him from dying," the middle said. I nodded slowly. And then, I knelt. Placed one hand on each of their shoulders, one at a time. "You did well," I said. They didn't smile. But they glowed a little brighter. Later that day, we went to the mountains. No one followed. No satellites. No drones. I made sure of that. I bent the light around us, warped perception fields, fragmented every wave and signal that tried to breach my zone. Because what I was about to do couldn't be recorded. Shouldn't be recorded. It wasn't a murder. It wasn't a betrayal. It was a return. I stood at the peak of the highest ridge, wind tearing at my coat, the sky above blank and watching. The triplets hovered before me, unblinking. "I made you," I said. "And you've learned what I needed you to." They said nothing. "I told you I'd protect you. And I will. Inside me. With me. As me." The middle one stepped forward first. "I'm ready," he said. The other two followed. I closed my eyes. Reached into the Omnitrix. Felt its hum change. Alien X. The transformation took me again, but not as it had before. This time, it burned. My back arched. My skin shuddered. My bones resonated. Because I wasn't transforming alone. I was fusing. 3 lines of energy shaped like thought and blood streamed from their bodies into mine. Not absorbed like power. Merged like memory. Pain hit me in layers. Pressure. Time dilation. I heard their voices echoing inside. Then fading. Then becoming mine. When it ended, I was still standing. Alien X looked the same. Almost. Except. I raised a hand to my face. Looked into a polished stone I manifested before me. And there they were. 3 horns. Small. Uneven. Just forming. But real. They shimmered faintly with inner light. 1 on each side. 1 at the center of the forehead. And inside, I felt it. Power. Deeper. Denser. Richer. Not just cosmic awareness, but awareness with purpose. With memory. I could think faster. Move broader. My vision stretched through a dozen sub-layers of reality. My body didn't float anymore, it anchored the world to itself. The theory had been right. The horns weren't decoration. They were voices. And now they were mine. I returned home as night fell. And within the hour, I set the next batch of pods in motion. 3 more. Slightly altered. Better parameters. I would train them. Test them. Absorb them. Until I had what I needed. Until the horns grew tall. Until no one could match me, not Viltrumite, not Viltrum, not anyone. Switch to Mark's POV. The world spun in fragments. My ears rang like they'd been filled with glass and thunder. The taste of blood was thick in my throat, my jaw numb, my ribs burning with every breath. I hovered, barely upright, just high enough to see the sky retreating above me. And him. Nolan. My father. Floating above, fists clenched, cape torn, blood matting his beard. He looked at me once. Just once. And then he flew away. No words. No goodbye. Just the sound of wind, and the pressure of abandonment falling like stone into my lungs. I didn't fall. Not yet. But everything else did. My breath. My faith. The shape of what I thought my life was. And behind my eyes, all I could see before the blackness crept in were 3 aliens. Silent. Watching. Protecting me from him. Shredder, I muttered, voice weak. But he wasn't there. Just his shadows. Then the world turned dark. And I let myself fall. Invincible, what if I have the recalibrated Omnitrix? Chapter 41, The Silence After the Fall. The second the door to my room shut behind me, I locked it. Bolted it. Drew the curtains tight and sealed the edges with shadow stitching fabric I'd woven from fragments of feedback frequency loops completely undetectable to drones or eyes or sensors. Inside the pod chamber, the machine purred. 3 new gestation tanks glowed faintly, each already half filled with a swirl of embryonic stardust and distilled samples from my bloodline, drawn with better calibration. Their growth would take less time now, optimized input, faster neurological imprinting, and this time I'd give them names that weren't numbers. They'd need that. I didn't stay long. I had somewhere to be. Mark had finally woken up. The GDA medical wing wasn't like a hospital. It smelled too clean, too dry. Like the air had been filtered 100 times more than necessary to keep something other than infection out. Cecil met me at the threshold. Didn't smile. Didn't speak, not at first. He just nodded. Inside, Mark was upright in bed, shirtless, arms bruised, one eye swollen, and 4 buried in the crook of his arm and a healing fracture across his collarbone. But awake. His head turned slowly as I entered. Shredder. His voice was dry. Raspy. I gave a short nod, walked to the edge of the bed, and didn't pretend it was casual. He sat up straighter. Those aliens. The ones that helped me. I kept my tone level. What about them? Who were they? He asked, urgency creeping into the corners of his voice. They looked like that thing you showed me. That alien you transformed into. Alien X. They're students, I said calmly. I've been teaching them. Guiding them. They're not from around here, obviously. Their people entrusted me with them, and I didn't expect them to get involved so soon. Mark was quiet for a beat. Then he exhaled. Tell them thanks. Please. If they hadn't jumped in. He didn't finish. I filled the silence, just enough. I'm sure you would have been fine, Mark. You're stronger than you think. And if they hadn't made it in time, maybe I would have. You're not alone. His eyes met mine. And something behind them softened. Thanks, man, he whispered. I nodded and stood. Rest. You'll be back on your feet soon. He smirked, though it didn't reach his eyes. Better be. Or William's gonna make fun of me for getting my ass kicked in front of half the planet. I offered a small smile, just for show, and left the room before the emotion stuck too deep. The sun had just begun to rise when I walked into school. The main hallway buzzed not with movement, but noise. Everyone was talking. Not laughing, not shouting. Just low murmurs. Phones out. Eyes darting. Amber stood near her locker, her face tight and unreadable, whispering to a friend. William was talking to someone near the stairwell, gesturing with both hands. Even the teachers were quiet, watchful, nervous, like the air was heavy with things none of them could explain. And I didn't need to ask why. I walked past a group of sophomores whispering around a phone screen, and caught just enough to confirm it. Omni-Man leaves Earth. The fall of Earth's hero. Who were the 3 alien children? I passed them without looking. They didn't know his name. They didn't know where he'd gone. They didn't know who had stepped in. They didn't know me. And that was good. Because what they didn't know couldn't scare them yet. Not me. Not the triplets. Not what I was building in secret. Let them gossip. Let them guess. Let the world whisper about gods. Because gods don't explain themselves. They teach. They test. And when the time comes, they remake the world. Chapter 42, Worlds He Shouldn't Find. The night air shimmered, and I stood once again in the cold corridors of the Mahler twins' underground lab, distant hums of generators echoing like the quiet breath of machines too deep beneath the city to ever see the sun. I had transformed into Alien X to reach them, teleporting without ripple or sound, a god in the shape of a boy. But when I arrived, I shifted down into grey matter, my voice small and sharp, body weightless as I perched on the edge of a steel table cluttered with tools I understood faster than they could assemble. One of the Mahler twins looked up, grease streaked across his forearms. "Boss. Been a while." The other was replacing something inside a clone incubation unit, more focused on the sealant than on me. "You're early. Didn't expect you until next week." I hopped off the table and folded my arms. "What have you been up to?" "Nothing much," said the first twin. "Small calibrations. We've been refining the protein mass filters from the last sample batch. Had to purge 2 tanks from unstable nuclei." The second nodded. "We salvaged the cores, though. Reusable." I looked at them. Thought for a beat. Then said, "We're changing the project's scope." That got their attention. Both turned toward me fully now. I teleported out for a second, just long enough to retrieve the new Alien X growth pods I'd been working on at home. They hovered behind me now, gleaming black and white with organic frames etched from celestial metal. 3 fetal star bodies floated within, half-shaped, pulsing slowly. The Maulers stared. "You're making more?" one asked, almost reverently. I dropped a data slate onto the table. "Here's what you'll need to replicate them. Same formula, updated stability thresholds. Pull the materials using the supplier networks you already tapped for the regenerating tissue vats." The twins leaned over the specs, eyes darting across the blueprints like wolves circling a kill. "This is advanced," one murmured. "Even for us," said the other. "Some of this tech, where did you get this quantum spinal weave?" "I didn't," I said. "I invented it." They looked up. Then smiling nodded as one. "Yes, boss. I want as many as possible," I said. "You'll be using this." I ducked into the side chamber, transformed back into Alien X, and drew blood. A lot. Carefully stabilized plasma, filtered through time-slowed filtration units in my own anatomy. When I returned in grey matter form, the vial was faintly glowing. I handed it to them. "Use this. Only this. It's all compatible. Work fast, work clean." They bowed mockingly, but with respect. "Yes, boss." I didn't stay long. Later that night, I stood on the edge of Earth's moon, the Omnitrix interface pulsing against my wrist. I turned into Alien X again. The shift was easier now. My mind adjusted faster. The added horns, small though they were, had already begun to alter my awareness. I felt broader. More precise. I felt dimensions moving when I blinked. And so I blinked. And made a world. A planet, forged near Earth's orbital region, but just outside the range of common sensors. It formed with a thought core to crust, atmosphere to temperature, tides to tectonics. I adjusted its gravity 10 times Earth's weight. I tuned the sunlight to feed photosynthesis and war blood. Then I made the people. Not scions. But Xarins. Humanoid in shape. Tough. Bred for combat. All born with enhanced strength, gravity-dense bones, and an instinct for battle. They had tails, yes. Bronze-colored eyes. Naturally spiked hair that shifted under emotion. Most could increase their strength explosively with pain. But they weren't a copy. They were mine. Engineered from pieces of cosmic matter and dream logic, born into a world that would teach them violence like a first language. And into that world, I dropped a king. Not Vegeta. But King Rhaegar, ruler of Xarin. Noble-chinned. Steel-eyed. A warrior philosopher with control over gravity and a mouth that did not speak lightly. Then, I left. But not before I reached through a fold in space. And found Nolan. He was still flying. Alone. Aimless. Wounded in pride more than body. A drifted man pretending he wasn't running. I plucked him from orbit and placed him near Xarin. He didn't even notice. Until the atmosphere changed. Nolan landed hard. His boots struck cracked black stone volcanic rock under a sun more orange than Earth's. He looked around, breathing steady, posture raised. It took him only a second to register the presence. 2 Xarins launched from the cliffs. They didn't speak. They just attacked. Nolan dodged the first barely while the second's fist grazed his jaw, pushing him half a meter backward. He blinked. Shook his head. Frowned. "These aren't humans," he muttered. The Xarins circled him. Fast. Precise. Then another figure landed. Cloaked in silver and black. Crowned. Broad-shouldered. Tail wrapped around one leg. "I am King Rhaegar," he said. "And you are not welcome here." Nolan narrowed his eyes. "I'm Nolan. From the planet Viltrum. I am not here to invade." Rhaegar's gaze didn't waver. "We are the Xarins. We do not fear Viltrumites. We were born fighting under tenfold gravity. If you test us..." He let the words settle. "You'll learn what it means to bleed in the dirt you made." Nolan said nothing. Not right away. Because for the first time in his long life, he didn't know if he'd win. And far away, hidden in the folds between stars, I watched from the edge of the void. Not interfering. Not directing. Just smiling. Let the Viltrumites learn. They weren't the only predators anymore. Chapter 43, The Edge of Trust. The wind on Xarin was dry and full of heat. Not scorching, just heavy. Thick with the iron scent of dust and sweat, of sparring bodies and bruised stone, of men and women who had grown up fighting each other with the same ease other worlds learned to speak. Nolan Grayson stood silent as the 2 warriors withdrew, each one giving him a narrow-eyed glance before falling back to the ridge where they'd first attacked. Their movements were sharp but respectful, like wolves recognizing another apex predator, even if he was an unfamiliar breed. "I don't want to fight," Nolan said at last. "Not anymore." The Xarin king, Rhaegar, tilted his head. His cloak of tattered battle banners fluttered faintly in the wind, stitched from victories and losses alike. "That is wise," he said. "Peace is not weakness. Only refusal to accept consequences." He turned on his heel and began walking slowly, without posturing, and Nolan followed. They traveled down into the valley where the stone village lay, a place carved from black mountain rock and lit by glowing mineral veins woven through the walls. It was modest. No golden temples or towers. Just thick shelters, circular sparring pits, and streets littered with training dummies and broken weapons. Children with tails wrestled in dirt rings while elders with sharp eyes watched from shaded porches. Everywhere he looked, Nolan saw preparation. No excess. No vanity. A society built for war, not conquest. And for the first time in a long while, he didn't see fear. "You've heard of Viltrumites?" Nolan asked, watching two teenagers throw each other through stone columns with feral grins. Rhaegar gave a nod, hands behind his back. "We have. You are a species of empire. You conquer planets for the survival of your race. You've culled worlds. And yet you're not concerned." Rhaegar stopped walking. Turned. "We're not suicidal," he said. "We're aware of what Viltrum can do. But if they ever come here, they will earn every drop of blood they try to take. We were not made to kneel." Nolan held his gaze. "I see," he said finally. "You can stay," Rhaegar told him. "You bleed. You flee. You question your place. That means you're no longer a pure weapon. As long as you do nothing against our people, you may rest here." Nolan hesitated only a moment, then nodded. "I will. I need time to think." Rhaegar didn't smile. But he did place a firm hand on Nolan's shoulder. "Then take it. But remember when the storm comes here, and it will, we expect you to stand with us. Not above us." And Nolan said, quietly, "I understand." My POV. I saw Mark again that morning. It had been 2 days since his return to consciousness. He hadn't reached out. No messages. No call. I didn't blame him. The sky had cracked open for him, and all the old truths had leaked out like blood from a deep, hidden wound. At school, he moved like someone underwater, slow, present, but far away. He smiled when people waved but didn't mean it. He answered questions in class, but his tone lacked weight. At lunch, he sat across from me. William tried to joke, tried to poke, but the moment passed fast. William knew not to press. Eve didn't come that day. "Hey," I said softly. Mark looked up, tray untouched. His face had healed mostly, but there was something behind the eyes now. That look someone has when they realize the man they wanted to be like was never who they thought. When you realize a lie raised you more than truth. "You okay?" I asked. Mark gave a weak smile. "Yeah. Just tired." I leaned in a little. Kept my voice low. "You don't have to say it if you're not." He was quiet for a while. Then, "It wasn't supposed to be like that, you know?" He was Omni-Man. He said it like a memory and a curse at the same time. I nodded. "Let the silence breathe between us." "I don't even know if I hit him," Mark added, looking down at his tray. "Or if he just let me." "You stood your ground," I said. "That counts more than landing a punch." He laughed, softly. Bitterly. "Easy for you to say. You didn't have to fight him." "No. I didn't. But I'd watched. And I'd made sure someone else was there to keep Mark from dying. He didn't need to know that. Not yet." "Well," I said, rising. "When you're ready, there's still a whole planet out there that needs you." He looked up. Blinked. "You think I can still be that guy?" I gave him a small, tired grin. "I think you already are." And then I walked away. Leaving him with that seed of belief. Just enough. Until he grew into it. Chapter 44, Among the Ash-Blooded. Nolan Grayson POV. The days passed slowly on Xarin, but not empty. There were no great towers here. No monuments carved to the dead. No illusions of peace wrapped in parliamentary dressing. The people of this planet did not bother to hide what they were, a war-forged culture that valued strength, discipline, and community over conquest. That alone had disarmed me more than any force they'd thrown at me. I worked. That was how it began. Not out of guilt, not even out of humility, though perhaps something like both had been gnawing beneath the surface of my chest since I left Earth. No, I worked because I needed to. To feel something under my hands again. To earn the air I was breathing. It started with the children. I helped reinforce the sparring pits. Hauled slabs of black stone up from the quarry when two of the younger Xarins broke through one of the practice rings. I didn't draw attention to myself. I didn't need to. They saw the cape. They knew who I was. They didn't fear me. Not anymore. They respected only what I could do here. For them. Not for Viltrum. Not for some banner stretched over stars. But for a village that bled and healed together. The third night, King Rhaegar summoned me to the central fire. The village had no throne. Just a circle of stone seats where the elder fighters met. Rhaegar didn't wear a crown, just a mantle made from the hides of beasts I hadn't yet seen on this planet. He waved me toward a flat seat across from him, where the glow of the fire cracked against his armor. "You've been working." "I needed something to do," I replied. "You fixed a water line without being asked. You rebuilt a roof with nothing but your hands. You lifted one of our elders out of a collapsed tunnel and didn't ask for recognition." "I'm not here for thanks." "I know," Rhaegar said, watching me. "That's why it's worth giving." He leaned forward slightly. "We do not offer titles lightly. Rank here is earned with service, not strength alone. But you, Nolan of Viltrum, you've done more for my people in a week than many Xarins do in a year." I waited. Rhaegar reached into his belt and pulled out a ring. Metal, thick and blackened with the same veins that ran through the planet's rock. The symbol etched into it wasn't one I recognized, but I felt what it meant. Leadership. Responsibility. "If you would accept it, I offer you the mantle of Royal Minister of Defense and Outsider Relations. You would answer only to me. Guide our warriors. Speak when I cannot. Negotiate when I must remain silent. Be a weapon of peace and shield alike." I stared at the ring. "I'm not a Xarin," I said. "You bled here. Worked here. Earned here. And besides," Rhaegar gave a sharp grin, "you are the first outsider we've ever known who stayed to help, not to conquer." There was silence between us then. The fire crackled. Somewhere nearby, a young fighter let out a victorious howl after a clean throw. I took the ring. It was heavy. "I accept," I said quietly. The role wasn't ceremonial. The next morning, I stood alongside Rhaegar and the circle of elders as they presided over warrior trials, young Xarins challenging one another for rank. I gave judgment when Rhaegar stepped aside. My words were recorded. My decisions respected. I was assigned a residence modest, near the high cliffs with a view of the upper training fields and the storm-forged mountain pass beyond. I ate with the soldiers. Slept in quarters with no lock on the door. I watched younglings train through bruises and tears, and saw elders quietly leave to die when they no longer had the strength to lift a blade. I remembered Mark's face. Bloodied. Confused. Betrayed. I remembered Earth, and how much I had ruined. Here, there was no Earth. No Viltrum. Just Xarin, and a village that expected nothing from me but my honor. That alone made it harder to carry. And yet, in this place of broken stone and heat and loyalty forged in sweat, I finally began to feel human again. Or something like it. Far above, in the outer bands of orbit, satellites scanned for me. Cecil's agencies still searched. Earth's people still whispered. But I didn't return their signals. Didn't answer. Didn't fly back. Because for the first time in centuries, I was building something without blood. And it terrified me. How much I wanted to keep it. Chapter 45, The Gravity Between Us. First Person Shredder. 2 years was a long time to live with secrets. And I had more than most. Mark sat across from me on the ledge outside the old clock tower, kicking his legs like he was still 17. The sunset carved bronze shadows across the city skyline, and in the golden hush between words, we just sat. Peaceful. Normal. I took a slow breath and glanced sideways at him. You ever think about him? Mark didn't answer right away. He didn't need to ask who I meant. Every day, he said eventually. Even when I don't want to. I nodded. Not prying. Not yet. He's not dead, I said. You know that. Mark tilted his head. Cecil says the trail went cold. Every satellite, every sweep, nothing. I smirked faintly. Cecil's good. But I'm better. That got his attention. Mark turned. You found him? I didn't say yes. Didn't say no. Just stood and stretched. There's a planet I've been watching. Gravity's high. Climate stable. People there are different. I think it's time we checked it out. Mark blinked. What kind of different? They're strong, I said. Strong enough that if they ever look outward toward us we'll wish we knew more. Mark didn't hesitate. When do we leave? I smiled. 30 minutes later, we were punching through the upper stratosphere. I'd taken feedback for the boost his power conductivity made spaceflight a breeze when paired with inertia reader Rex and Mark. Well, he was finally comfortable enough in his own skin to just fly without questioning every foot of altitude. We passed the moon in silence. Earth fell away, small and blue and unknowing. Does this planet have a name? He asked, voice relayed through the small transmitter patch I'd built into my shoulder. Not one you'd know, I said. I call it Xarin. Sounds dramatic. It is. The moment we entered Xarin's upper orbit, I felt it. The pressure. Not the kind that crushes lungs or snaps bones, but the kind that tells your muscles they're not enough. This planet didn't want you. It tolerated you if you earned it. I gestured downward. Drop with me. Mark followed. The surface hit us like a living heartbeat. Dusty whines, cracked black stone, sharp cliffs wrapped in volcanic haze and storms that never quite touched the ground. But we didn't have time to admire it. The second our boots hit the soil, we were hit literally by 3 warriors descending in blur-speed arcs. The first one, tail like a whip and arms built like battering rams, slammed Mark into the canyon wall. The second moved too fast for my first blink, her fists landing against my feedback form in a flurry of thunderclaps that turned the air into dust and echoes. The third didn't attack. He hovered, watching. An observer with eyes that measured pressure, reaction time, breathing rate. A tactician. I gritted my teeth and pushed feedback's volt conduction to the surface, countering a punch with a shock that grounded the female attacker. She rolled, adjusted, smiled. Mark groaned, wings of debris rising as he stood. Okay, he gasped. You said strong. You didn't say insane. I undersold it, I admitted, raising my arm for another pulse. We were about to be overwhelmed. Not because we were weak, but because we didn't know the rules here. These people did. And they were playing for blood. Then the air changed. Fast. A voice cut through it like gravity given shape. That's enough. The attackers halted instantly mid-strike, mid-flight, mid-breath. Like war had paused itself to listen. A shadow fell across the canyon floor. Mark froze. So did I. He stood atop a jagged cliff ridge, cape fluttering in a storm-slick wind, his beard longer now, his eyes older but just as sharp. Nolan Grayson. Omni-Man. Dad. Mark whispered. Nolan's face didn't move. His eyes scanned us both, tension flickering across his jaw. But beneath the stoicism, there was something more jagged. Something undone. "Mark," he said, voice low, steady. "I wasn't expecting you." Mark rose from the rubble, fists half clenched. "I wasn't expecting you to leave Earth after beating me half to death." The wind hissed through the canyon. Nolan didn't flinch. "I'm not proud of what I did." Mark's voice cracked, barely above a whisper. "Then why?" "Because I was still a Viltrumite." Nolan dropped down slowly, feet hitting the stone with a quiet finality. "And everything they taught me told me you were a weakness. That Earth was a weakness. I was wrong." Mark looked at him like he didn't believe a single word. But he didn't attack. He didn't run either. He just stood there, and listened. Nolan turned to me. "You brought him here." I nodded. It was time. He studied me. Eyes narrowing faintly. "You've been watching," he said. I didn't answer. He didn't need me to. Nolan led us across the cliffs, through winding mountain paths that led into the heart of Xarin, a village hewn from obsidian and fire-forged steel. Mark walked stiffly. Cautiously. His eyes scanning the people. Every Xarin we passed bowed not to Nolan, but to their king's minister of defense. "How long have you been here?" Mark asked, voice tight. "Almost 2 years," Nolan said. "They took me in. I helped. I earned my place. And Earth. I stayed away," Nolan replied, turning to him. "Because I didn't trust myself not to make it worse." Mark's fists trembled at his sides. "You should have come back," he said. "You should have said something." "I wasn't ready," Nolan said. "But maybe, now I am." He showed us the barracks. The training pits. The star forges where they bent raw gravity into weapons. Mark didn't speak much. I kept my observations internal. Noted the muscle density of the warriors. Their reaction times. Their unit cohesion. Their respect for Nolan. He wasn't a tyrant here. He was a teacher. And maybe, just maybe, he was trying to earn forgiveness the only way he knew how. We stopped at the edge of a cliff where Xarin's twin suns dipped toward the horizon. Nolan stood beside Mark. Said nothing. After a long moment, Mark spoke. "I don't forgive you yet." Nolan nodded once. "I know. But I don't want to fight anymore." "Neither do I." Silence. Then quietly, like a child remembering how to laugh, Mark smiled. "Just a little." I stepped back. Let them have it. This wasn't my story right now. Not yet. But I had made it possible. And I'd be watching. Because if the Viltrumites ever came again, they'd find not just Mark. Not just Nolan. But all of us. And Xarin would not fall easy. Chapter 46, A World That Accepts Him. First-person Shredder. I left them at the ridge, where the red wind curled through Nolan's hair and Mark tried to bury the ache in his spine behind stiff shoulders and silence. He didn't say goodbye. Didn't ask me where I was going. I just turned away. And vanished. Some moments weren't meant for interruption, especially not the kind Mark needed. But as I phased out, my eyes flicked over his face, and I caught something in his expression. Something reluctant. Conflicted. Not quite anger. Not quite peace. He didn't know what to feel. And that was exactly where healing begins. I didn't leave the planet completely. Not yet. Xarin pulled at me like gravity, not the kind that crushed, but the kind that kept you tethered. It was easy to see why Nolan had stayed. Why he hadn't flown back to Earth, to the rubble he'd helped create. Here, he was, respected. No, not just that. Trusted. That's what Mark would notice soon enough. I watched from a high plateau as Mark followed Nolan through the village center. The villagers didn't flinch at Nolan's presence. Didn't shrink or posture. They nodded, greeted him, treated him like one of their own. No awe. No fear. Just trust built through repetition. Nolan helped lift a youngling out of a collapsed sparring ring. Spoke to a group of engineers rebuilding part of the gravity stabilization forge. He didn't lecture. He listened. Gave brief advice. Moved on. Mark followed like a shadow, saying little, eyes wide. Two elders stopped Nolan near the communal fire pit, speaking quickly in Xarin dialect. Nolan didn't interrupt. He waited. Then answered softly. One of them laughed and slapped his shoulder in thanks. Mark blinked. He didn't understand the language, but he understood what it meant. Respect without worship. Authority without fear. A man who had burned his name into Earth's memory. Had rebuilt it, quietly, on a world with no reason to forgive him. I watched Mark as they climbed the observation tower, just outside the old ridge line. From there, the whole village was visible, cut into volcanic ridges and sharp cliff spines like scars made useful. Mark stood at the edge, arms crossed, silent for a long time. Then he spoke. I was close enough to hear. But far enough that he didn't know I was still there. You like it here, he said, not accusingly. Nolan didn't deny it. They don't expect me to be a symbol. Or a soldier. Or a monster. They just expect me to be useful. Mark didn't look at him. They don't know what you did. They know enough, Nolan said. They know I left a world I was sent to conquer. That I broke orders. That I bled in the dirt beside them, not above them. Mark's voice was quieter now. But do you miss it? Earth. Nolan hesitated. Then, every day. Mark's jaw clenched. He swallowed hard. Then why not come back? I can't fix what I broke by just returning, Nolan said. But I can become something better here. Maybe, one day, that'll be enough. Mark nodded once. Then turned his eyes to the sky. I didn't stay long after that. Didn't need to. The seed was planted. Nolan had been seen. And not as a god. Not as a villain. Just a man. In a place where no one bowed to myths. As I transformed into Alien X, preparing to fold space around me, I let one last thought linger. Mark had come here expecting a confrontation. Instead, he found a father rebuilding himself from dust. And the planet? It didn't belong to either of them. But it had room for both. Even if it only started with silence and time. Chapter 47, Roots in Ash and Sky. Third-person POV Mark Grayson. The twin suns dipped low in the Xarin sky, casting long shadows across the village's black stone rooftops. Mark stood in the tower long after his father had left, eyes fixed on the horizon, arms folded tightly across his chest as if squeezing too hard might force the thoughts out of his skull. The air was heavier here. Not just the gravity though, that too, like a constant hand pressing against the ribs, but something older. Denser. As if every breath carried the weight of battles long buried, victories and deaths carved into the earth like unspoken scripture. He watched as a group of children, maybe 5 or 6 years old, wrestled in the training pit far below. Their laughter carried upward, fierce and bright, filled with no fear of weakness. They struck, fell, got back up. Over and over. It didn't look like discipline. It looked like freedom. Mark swallowed. For 2 years, he'd held that moment on the mountain in his lungs like smoke. His father's hands bloody. His words cruel. That look in his eye cold and exact, like the whole planet was an equation he'd already solved and was waiting to erase. And now he was this. A man in a simple village, nodding to farmers, helping elders adjust the forge light, carrying buckets like any other villager. He wasn't a conqueror here. He wasn't Omni-Man. Not anymore. Later that evening, Nolan invited him to dinner. It wasn't much seared meat from some tusked beast with no earth equivalent, and a bitter herbal stew that left a dry aftertaste, but the quiet that hung over the meal was almost worse than anything Mark had tasted. Nolan sat across from him, eating slowly. No mask. No armor. Just a shirt rolled up to the elbows, arms still scarred from burns and healed fractures. His beard was grey now, not just dark with time but woven with fatigue. "So," Mark said finally, pushing his bowl slightly away. "What do you do here exactly?" "Fix roofs and dig trenches." Nolan glanced up, a shadow of amusement in his tired expression. "That's part of it. And the other part?" "I train new recruits," he said. "Help oversee defense coordination. I sit on Rhaegar's war council. I mediate disputes. Sometimes I hunt the wild leviathans that drift into the outer canyons." Mark raised an eyebrow. "So, what? You're a village handyman/general/protector." Nolan's expression didn't shift. "I'm needed here. In ways I never was on Earth." Mark looked down. Picked up a jagged shard of bone from the meat. Turned it over in his fingers. "You could have tried to be needed there." "I tried," Nolan said softly. "But I was trying to be the man Viltrum raised, not the one Earth needed." A long pause stretched between them. Mark's voice was quieter when he finally spoke again. "I didn't think you were capable of regret." "I wasn't. Until I met you." They walked through the village after the meal. Nolan didn't guide Mark. He let him drift. Let him see. The walls of the buildings were raw, unpainted, their exteriors marked with hand-scrawled stories, glyphs that recorded trials, births, deaths, and duels. It was history written in stone, not to be preserved in libraries but lived every day. Mark stopped at one house. A boy about his age was sparring with two older warriors, one male, one female. Their blows were precise, fast, and punishing. The boy's nose was bloodied, his arms trembling, but he didn't yield. When he finally dropped to a knee, they lifted him, spoke briefly, then sent him back into the ring. Nolan stepped beside him. "They don't stop," Mark murmured. "They don't believe in mercy without meaning," Nolan said. "Here, pain is part of growing. Not punishment. Not power." Mark didn't respond. He just watched. "Until finally," he said, "did they hurt you when you got here?" Nolan shook his head. "They didn't have to." And Mark understood. This place hurt people the way guilt did. Quietly. Slowly. Until you reshaped yourself around it. They reached the outer cliffs near midnight. The sky above Xarin wasn't black. It was a deep violet red, stars like cracks in some ancient painting. "You've changed," Mark said finally. "I had to." Mark glanced at him. "But are you sorry?" "I don't know if I'm allowed to be." Silence again. Mark sat down on a rock. Looked out over the vastness of this planet. "I thought I hated you," he said. "You did," Nolan replied, kneeling beside him. "Maybe part of you still does." I wanted to make sense of it. The words. The fists. That look on your face. Like I was disposable. Like Mom was just something convenient. "She wasn't," Nolan said sharply. "She isn't." "Then why did you say it?" "Because if I believed she mattered, then everything Viltrum told me was a lie." Mark's voice shook. "So you broke your own son to protect a lie?" Nolan didn't flinch. "Yes." Mark closed his eyes. The wind pulled gently at his hair. The ridge beneath him was sharp, unyielding. Then why do I still want to believe you can be better? Nolan breathed out. Just once. A long, quiet breath like a man learning to inhale again. Because you're my son. And you were always more human than I ever was. They sat there for a long time. Two men with blood between them, sharing silence and gravity and the slow stitching of a wound that may never fully close. In the distance, unnoticed, Shredder watched from above. Alien X's eyes glowed faintly behind the stars. He said nothing. But in that long, still moment, he let his silent judgment pass. And found both men, at last, beginning to become worthy. Chapter 48, What Comes After Forgiveness. First person Shredder. I watched them from orbit until the suns dipped low again, drawing Xarin into its blood-dusk silence. I didn't blink. Not even once. Alien X doesn't need to blink, and neither do I when I wear him. But it wasn't about sight. It was about weight. Atmosphere. Pattern. And most of all stillness. Mark and Nolan. Father and son. Sitting on a cliff like they hadn't tried to kill each other 2 years ago. They hadn't spoken for a while. That was fine. Talking was overrated in a place like Xarin. There's something deeper about silence here, almost sacred. You didn't waste it on meaningless words. You waited. Let gravity settle through your thoughts like sand through a sieve. And if something remained when the weight passed, that's what was worth saying. When I saw Mark finally stand, I phased down. I landed a few ridges away. Still feedback, still charged, still listening. Mark approached me alone. Nolan stayed behind. He looked older. More than just time. It was in the shape of his jaw now, the way his shoulders hung not with fatigue, but responsibility. He wasn't a boy anymore. He stayed, Mark said. Yeah, I replied. He really didn't go back. I shook my head. Xarin gave him what Earth couldn't. A place to rebuild, not hide. Even Cecil couldn't trace him here. Mark stood quietly beside me, then dropped to sit on the edge of a jagged outcrop, boots dangling over nothing. I thought I'd want to scream at him, he said. Or hit him. Or make him bleed just a little. Just enough to prove he wasn't invincible to me anymore. And Mark chuckled, dry and exhausted. I couldn't. I looked in his eyes and I saw the same thing I saw in the mirror every day after he left. Regret. Shame. Like a sickness under the skin. I nodded slowly. He still carries it. I know. A pause. Does it ever stop hurting? He asked. I didn't answer right away. Not really, I finally said. But you build around the pain. Reinforce the cracks. You learn to walk without limping on most days. Mark ran a hand through his hair. Then, what about you? I tilted my head. What about me? You knew he was here. For how long? Since the day he vanished. I tracked him before Cecil's satellites went blind. Waited for confirmation. Then watched. Mark glanced at me. And you didn't tell me? No, I said plainly. Why? Because if you saw him too soon, it would have broken you again. That silence between us now wasn't angry. Just full. Full of tension, understanding, unfinished grief. He didn't argue. That was enough. As the sun vanished behind Xarin's black cliffs, Mark finally stood. What happens now? He asked. You mean with Nolan? Mark nodded. I don't know, I admitted. But you found him. That's something. He didn't run. That's something too. He's not Omni-Man anymore. No, I said. He's just Nolan. Mark turned and started walking back toward the village. His silhouette framed by fading light, his cape yet, he'd started wearing one fluttered behind him like a torn flag stitched back together. He paused once more. "Thanks," he said. "For what?" "For not giving up on him. Or me." I didn't reply. He didn't need it. Later, I returned to Earth. Alien X folded space in less time than a thought. I landed quietly in the basement of my house, beneath the false floor, surrounded by quiet hums and unfinished experiments. 3 new Alien X pods pulsed with faint life in the corner, young, undeveloped, potential incarnate. I stood over them, watching the slow swirl of black and stars, like seeds waiting to bloom into gods. I could still feel the horns beneath my skin. 3 short ridges now almost insignificant. But I could feel it, I was stronger. My mind clearer. Alien X no longer felt like a borrowed weapon. It felt like a second skin. And I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. But something had shifted. I didn't crave power the same way now. Watching Nolan find peace, real peace, not domination, had done something. I couldn't unsee it. Couldn't unthink it. Maybe even the strongest monsters could learn to stand still. Maybe even I could. I looked at the pods one last time before leaving the lab. Locked the door. Walked upstairs. Stepped outside. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I just looked up at the stars. And didn't think about conquering a damn thing. Chapter 49, The Sky We Buried. First-person shredder. The wind had changed again. Not just over Xarin, where the twin suns now dipped in seasonal shifts, ushering deeper crimson storms across the volcanic mountains, but inside me. In my bones. In the way I moved through space and time. I could feel it in the hum of the Omnitrix as it pulsed against my wrist. Lately, it didn't just respond to me, it sensed me. Like it knew I wasn't the same. And maybe, just maybe, I didn't want to be. The morning after returning from Xarin, I went for a walk. No transformation. No celestial projections or gravitational pulses or teleportation jumps across the globe. I just put on a hoodie, left the suit and invisibility weave behind, and walked through the neighborhood like I was someone ordinary. People were out. Students late for class. An old man mowing the same patch of dying grass for the 3rd time this week. Mothers yelling across porches at kids who forgot lunches. The smell of asphalt and damp trash bags filled the air. It was ugly. It was normal. And it grounded me more than anything I could build in my lab. At school, Mark met me by my locker like nothing had happened. He didn't bring up Xarin. Didn't mention his father. He just leaned against the lockers with a half smile and said, "History test today. You cheat, I'll know." "I don't need to cheat," I said. "I already corrected 3 factual errors in the textbook." Mark rolled his eyes, but I caught the grin he tried to hide. That was new. Or rather, old, something I hadn't seen in months. A lightness that had finally returned to him now that the shadow of Omni-Man wasn't hanging from every cloud. We ate lunch with William under the old courtyard tree. He talked about dorm applications. Mark made fun of his socks. I stole one of his fries. It was stupid and mundane and felt exactly right. Eve joined us halfway through the period, arms crossed, eyes sharp but warm. Her smile was tired, but genuine. Mark scooted over without saying anything. She sat beside him and leaned her head just barely on his shoulder. I watched that quiet closeness and realized. They were finally beginning to heal. Not just them. All of us. That night, I went home and descended back into the lab. The Omnitrix clicked softly as I transformed into grey matter, shrinking down, bone and muscle reconfiguring until I was only inches tall but mentally several magnitudes sharper. I approached the new batch of Alien X pods. 3 of them. Young, quiet, One had already begun showing signs of emergent cognition, complex internal movement patterns, slight gravitational anomalies, shadow pulse through the embryonic gel. Not just potential. Identity. The others were lagging behind. I'd need to adjust nutrient density and exposure to higher-order cosmic radiation from the temporal chamber I'd built out of scavenged black hole fragments last month. I didn't speak to them. Not yet. Not until they could speak back. But I did think. 3 more. Each one I could raise. Train. Nurture. And eventually, if my theory held, absorb. 3 more horns. 3 more keys. And yet, my hand hovered above the release valve and did not press. I sat in the quiet hum of the lab and stared at the pods for a long time, mind racing at 1,000 frames per second, and still. Something in me hesitated. I'd seen what unchecked power looked like. I'd seen Omni-Man at his worst. I'd seen what redemption cost a god who forgot how to kneel. And more dangerously, I'd seen what respect looked like when it wasn't taken by force. The next morning, I didn't go back to the lab. Instead, I transformed into feedback, launched into low orbit, and hovered in the mesosphere high above the clouds, where the sunlight cuts clean and sharp through the ozone. No noise. No humanity. No gravity. Just thought. Omnitrix, I said aloud. Scan internal diagnostics. Estimate transformation stability at current horn alignment. The device glowed faintly. Alien X horn index, 3.05. Cognitive fusion, 82% unified. Projected potential, plus 18% power stability. Plus 300% temporal control growth. No personality conflict detected. I nodded. The fusion of the other 3 Alien X variants had worked. Not just biologically, spiritually. My hypothesis had been correct, the number of horns wasn't just a design motif. It was a signature of will. Of the number of conscious entities in perfect fusion within the form. 1 horn for each mind. The more minds aligned, the stronger Alien X became. The more stable. The more godlike. And yet, why did I still feel more human than ever? A voice pinged through my ear receiver. Mark. Hey. Got a second? Yet. Cecil just sent something. Said it might be nothing. Thought we'd check it out. Location. West Africa. Border of Mali and Burkina Faso. Energy signature reads like some kind of interdimensional breach. Weird frequencies. On my way. I transformed mid-fall, diving through cloud banks with a crackle of electricity trailing my frame like a thunderstorm given shape. Time to be a hero again. No gods. No thrones. No laboratories full of half-born deities. Just me. Mark. And the sky. And for once. That was enough. Chapter 50, Breach Lines and Blood Echoes. First-person shredder. The breach was pulsing by the time I arrived. Located in a dry scrubland just east of the Burkina Faso border, the anomaly carved itself into the soil like a second sun, hovering low, humming low, spinning in slow concentric spirals that defied physics with every flicker of violet-blue distortion. Time bled around it. The ground nearby was split and burned, grass twisted into glass, insects stuck midair like frozen raindrops. I flew low in feedback form, trailing electromagnetic sweeps, senses stretched across 8 frequency bands and 2 separate time slices. And still, it didn't make sense. This isn't natural, I muttered. I hope not, Mark said, landing beside me in a crunch of dry dirt, his yellow and blue suit scuffed from flight turbulence. Because if it is, nature's been hitting the gym. I nodded toward the anomaly. See that ring at the base? The shadows shouldn't be bending upward. That's not just light being warped, that's causality collapsing in on itself. Like a portal. No, I said. Worse. A scar. Something didn't open a door. It tore a hole. And whatever left it behind, wasn't meant to exist here. Mark squinted. Are we sure this isn't just another dimension leak? The flaxens came through one of those. I ran a short magnetic pulse through the core radiation, watching the field flicker. Nope. Too clean. Too precise. This wasn't tech. I looked at him. This was done by a person. We flew around the breach for a good 15 minutes, keeping distance. I tried to scan deeper, but every pulse feedback sent through the zone came back wrong, fragmented. Like echoes from a throatless scream. Not blocked. Not bounced. Just untranslated. Mark drifted beside me, arms folded, staring down. What do we do? I stabilize the perimeter. You alert Cecil. We don't go inside. Seriously? We're just gonna wait. Yes, I said flatly. Because for all my strength, I don't like walking into interdimensional meat grinders unprepared. Mark groaned but didn't argue. He tapped his communicator. Cecil, you there? A hiss of static. Then Cecil's voice, calm and cold as always. Go ahead, Mark. We've got a breach. East border of Burkina Faso. It's active. Definitely not a flaxen gate. It's worse. You with Shredder? Yeah. Good. Listen to him. Stay put. I'm sending a satellite scan and an aerial team. Keep the area clear. Mark looked at me and raised an eyebrow. Already done, I muttered, letting a wave of suppressive radiation erase any signal within a 5-mile radius. No one's tweeting this one. Half an hour passed. The sky dimmed slightly, unnatural for the time of day. The anomaly pulsed once. Twice. Then fell into a low, steady rhythm, like a heartbeat. Mark frowned. That normal? No. We watched. Then. A hand. It wasn't reaching through. Not exactly. But it formed out of the light like a slow birth, fingers assembling from filaments of raw distortion, skin the color of old ivory, veins black and luminous like liquid coal. Then a second hand followed. And then a face. A man's face. Eyes closed. Jaw scarred. No mouth. He wasn't alive. Not the way we were. Not anymore. Mark's fist clenched. What the hell is that? I whispered, more to myself than anyone, it's not a breach. It's a coffin. Mark turned to me. What? This isn't someone breaking through, I said. This is someone buried. This is a tomb. Someone put him here. In space-time itself. Locked between realities like a warning carved into the skin of the universe. And now he's waking up. Or, being dug up. The field behind us shimmered. We both turned at the same time, instincts flaring. 3 figures appeared out of nowhere. No sound. No warning. All armored. All alien. But not Flaxens. Not Viltrumites. Not Xarin. These were something new. Skin like lacquered obsidian. Eyes like inverted stars. Armor cracked with age but gleaming with tech far beyond Earth. They didn't walk. They hovered. Slightly off the ground, like they didn't accept gravity's rules. Mark dropped into a defensive stance. More aliens? We picking up strays now. I activated feedback's charge coils. You 3 here for the breach. The one in front, the tallest, didn't speak with a mouth. He projected meaning straight into our minds. You are intruding on a sealed zone. Withdraw. Mark gritted his teeth. Yeah, that's not how we do things on Earth. This is not Earth. This is a fracture. Your presence risks contamination. I stepped forward. Then explain. Because that thing, I gestured to the half-emerged corpse in the light, doesn't look like containment. It looks like a mistake. The alien turned its head slightly. Then raised its hand. Not in threat. In warning. He wakes, we all die. Mark tensed beside me. Shredder. I didn't move. Didn't blink. That corpse wasn't waking. It was responding. To us. To something in us. I felt the Omnitrix pulse once, and it wasn't just an energy ping. It was recognition. Whatever was buried in that fracture. It knew me. The sky above us cracked. Just once. A single arc of space folding inward. Like a door turning in on itself. I knew that signature. I'd used it 1,000 times. Alien X. But I hadn't touched the dial. Not now. Not yet. Then. A voice. No mouth. No air. Just thought. Shredder. It wasn't calling me. It was accusing. I took a step back. Mark looked over sharply. Dude? What is it? I didn't answer. Couldn't. Because I'd built gods. I'd cloned reality. And now something older than both was waking up to remind me. There are consequences to pretending you understand the infinite. Even when you wear its skin. The fracture pulsed again. The aliens flared with panic. Mark shouted something, but I wasn't listening. The Omnitrix burned. And deep beneath all logic and time. Something began to climb out. Chapter 51, Buried Stars, Breathing. First person Shredder. I didn't scream. I wanted to. My body was telling me to. The pulse of the Omnitrix wasn't just warning, it was pain, raw and ancient, digging beneath the skin of space and nerves, running along the spine of the universe and mine at the same time. The corpse in the breach wasn't a corpse. Not anymore. It had eyes now. Open and black, with white stars drifting inside them like they were floating in water. No pupils. No emotion. Just the infinite watching me back. And behind those eyes no thoughts, no language, just a single, terrible awareness. Like it had known I would come. Like it had waited. Mark yelled something again. I couldn't hear him through the noise in my skull. Not literal noise, not even pressure. Just a ringing sharp and deliberate, like a blade sliding down the edge of time itself. Then the tall alien, the obsidian armored one, raised both hands and spoke again. Not into my mind. Into reality. He is not meant for this cycle. Send him back. I heard it in a dozen languages, all at once. Ancient ones. Some I hadn't known existed. A few I recognized from Omnitrix database fragments I'd never decoded. And then they moved. I'd never seen motion like that. Not speed. Not teleportation. Precision. They crossed 50 meters of warped, gravitationally misaligned terrain in less than a heartbeat, and one of them grabbed the rim of the breach. It wasn't touching it. It was rewriting it. Refolding the edges. Stitching it shut with threads of hard light pulled from a reactor I couldn't even begin to analyze. The others turned on me. The one who'd spoken raised a hand. Not as a weapon. As a judgment. You have fractured the boundary by your presence. The infinite aspect recognizes you. This is a breach of containment law. Mark shouted again. Hey! Hey! You wanna explain that to me like a person? The alien didn't flinch. The infinite recognizes Shredder because he made himself its mirror. The echoes stir. That should not be. Okay, Mark muttered, taking a defensive step closer to me. Let's back it up. What is that thing? I answered this time. It's not a thing. They both looked at me. It's a memory. Frozen in space-time. Something from before our concept of time existed. And now it's trying to wake up. Mark's eyes went wide. Like Alien X. I nodded. But older. Cruder. Less human. Not shaped by will. Just existence. Then, the impossible happened. The corpse smiled. It didn't have a mouth. But its face bent. Its skull flexed. And through the breach across the universe, through distance and memory and laws I thought were immutable, I heard its voice again. This time, it wasn't calling me. It was speaking to itself. At last. One who sees. One who copies. Then the fracture cracked. Not open inward. Like a whirlpool folding in on itself. The figure was dragged down, not pulled. Voluntarily receding, not resisting. As though it had tested the waters. And was satisfied to wait. The breach vanished. Instantly. Like it had never been there. The obsidian-armored aliens turned as one and faced me. Mark floated beside me, panting slightly. He whispered, "Dude. What the hell just happened?" I didn't respond. I was staring at the ground. The burned grass. The smooth soil beneath where the body had stood. Still warm. Still echoing. The Omnitrix's interface finally lit up again, whispering faint diagnostics. Interface alert. Cosmic imprint detected, Class 0 being. Archetype, null origin / pre-temporal entity. Mirror response, Alien X harmonic resonance unstable. You have been seen. The lead alien turned and began to hover away. Then paused. Shredder, he said this time aloud, in words. I straightened, feeling the hum beneath my ribs again. You have bent what was not meant to bend, he said. The entity knows your pattern. Your divergence is your warning. Mark stepped in. He saved our planet more times than you can count. He's not the problem. The alien did not look at Mark. That remains to be seen. Then they vanished. Cleanly. No light. No flash. Just absence. Mark looked at me. I was still staring at the dirt. Shredder, he asked softly. You okay? I finally looked at him. I made gods, I said. But something out there made the idea of gods. That night, I didn't go to the lab. Didn't train. Didn't absorb new alien XS. Didn't run tests or fly or read or even eat. I sat in the basement, in the dark, staring at the Omnitrix. And for the first time since arriving in this universe, I was afraid. Chapter 52, We Who Build Shadows. First-person Shredder. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, half wrapped in sheets I never bothered to wash, staring at the ceiling like it could answer the questions clawing their way through my skull. Outside, the world turned like it always had. School bells rang, dogs barked, sirens whispered past midnight intersections, but it all felt synthetic. Like someone had pressed play on a simulation I was only half believing in now. Something saw me. Something outside of what this universe could contain. And it didn't strike. Didn't lash out. It smiled. I went to the lab the next morning, early enough that the sun hadn't yet claimed the sky. Just a dull gradient of light slipping over rooftops like a secret. My boots echoed against the reinforced flooring as I descended into the hidden chamber beneath the house, flicking on banks of low amber light. The Alien X pods were glowing. Faint. Restless. Each was in a different stage of mental development, I'd slowed their acceleration this time on purpose. Not out of caution. Out of fear. Not for me, but for them. I had created something beautiful. Something powerful. And now I wondered if I was making the same mistake as the being in the breach. Trying to echo divinity without understanding the silence it was born in. I stood in front of Pod 07, my best variant yet. Its genetic complexity had stabilized beyond baseline, allowing for ethical behavioral traits to emerge before I programmed them. It had asked me, 2 days ago, why do I need to be strong if you already are? And I hadn't known how to answer. Mark called later that day. His voice was tight. You seen the news? No, I said flatly. What is it? There's been anomalies popping up in the Arctic Circle. Kind of like the breach we found. I exhaled through my nose. More of them. 3. 2 collapsed on their own. The third didn't. I didn't ask what that meant. I knew. Want backup? I asked. There was a pause. Then, yeah. I think I do. We met above the Earth's upper stratosphere, in orbit. Just the two of us suspended in the black between gravity and fire, hovering like forgotten gods. Mark's face was tense. No jokes today. No banter. I've been thinking about what those aliens said, he murmured, eyes scanning the dark curve of Earth below us. That I bent what shouldn't be bent. I said. He nodded. Do you think they were right? I think, I said slowly, we've lived in a house of mirrors long enough to forget what a real face looks like. Mark blinked. That's not comforting. It wasn't supposed to be. We dropped into the Arctic anomaly a few minutes later. No flare. No hero landing. Just silence and wind, howling like a wolf at war with the sky. The rift stood wide and jagged like someone had cut open the air with a cosmic scalpel. But it wasn't raw. It was smooth. Deliberate. Surgical. The corpse inside was different from the last. This one wasn't humanoid. It looked more like a fractured star given shape, bones of glass, tendrils of cracked light, a skull like a cathedral of thought. And again, the same message surged through the Omnitrix. You have been seen. But this time, something else followed. Why do you keep making what should remain alone? I stepped forward. Mark didn't stop me. The corpse didn't move. Didn't speak again. But the ice around it bent. Bent toward me. Not melting, leaning. Like the universe was bowing slightly in acknowledgement. Or recognition. And that's when I understood. These weren't just corpses. They weren't just breaches. They were echoes. Echoes of what came before reality. Before time. Before will. Before language or gods or even choice. And my alien ex-creations, no matter how pure, how refined, how loyal, they weren't improvements. They were imitations. And imitations, if seen by the original, are always judged. We left in silence. Not because we didn't have questions. But because we finally realized we weren't the ones with the right to ask them. That night, I returned to my lab. To the pods. I stood in front of them. Watched their slow, deliberate growth. Their minds like flickers in the dark, searching for shape. And I asked aloud, to the cold room, to myself, to them. Am I doing this because I need to win, or because I'm afraid of being small again? None of them answered. But I saw one flicker. Pod 07. He turned his head in the gel. His thoughts scraped faintly against mine. You're trying to protect. But you don't know from what. He was right. I was building weapons with souls. Because for the first time in my life, I knew I might need them. Chapter 53, The Cost of Knowing. First-person shredder. I woke at 3:44 a.m., heart racing. Not from a dream, because I hadn't slept. Just lying there, eyes open in the dark, mind spinning in silence so thick it felt like drowning under glass. My throat was dry. The Omnitrix felt heavy on my wrist. It hadn't made a sound, hadn't glowed, hadn't buzzed in days. But I could feel it, humming underneath reality. Something had changed. No, something was waiting. I went underground. Again. The reinforced platform slid back with a hiss, metal giving way to cool, artificial air and flickering monitors. 3 Alien X pods pulsed at the far end. Pod 07 was nearly full-sized now, his silhouette human-like, proportions stable, cerebral readings calm. He sat with legs crossed in the fluid, eyes closed. I walked over and put my hand on the glass. "Can you hear me?" I asked quietly. There was a pause. Then, "Yes, Father." It still caught me off guard every time he called me that. I had designed their consciousnesses to feel loyalty, to understand structure. But affection had emerged organically. "I need to ask you something," I said. "Ask. Do you feel it too? Something, watching? Something old?" Pod 07 opened his eyes. They weren't like mine. They weren't even like Alien X's usual star-swirled voids. They were wider. Not literally, but in depth, like looking through a hole in the universe and seeing the back of your own mind. "It is closer now," he said. "And it remembers." I ran systems diagnostics for an hour. Neural feedback in the Omnitrix remained erratic but stable. No degradation in fusion bonds. No detected corruption in my alien transformations. Yet, I couldn't shake the pressure behind my thoughts. Like there was something stitched into the seams of my memory that hadn't been there before. A voice that didn't speak. A direction I hadn't noticed being pointed toward. I stared at the evolving genetic tree of my Alien X variants. All 8 in development. 3 active. 5 stabilizing. I'd built them to be extensions of myself. To absorb and consolidate later. But with every passing day, I wondered. Would they let me? Mark called again that afternoon. His voice was less clipped than yesterday. Less breathless. But not back to normal. "We're not going to be able to ignore this thing," he said. "I know," I replied. "I mean it, Shredder. We're flying blind. We don't know what it is, what it wants, why now." I hesitated. "We do know one thing." Mark paused. "What?" "It knows me." He didn't answer at first. Then, "You think you caused this?" "No. I think I echoed something that should have stayed silent. My Alien X transformations, they aren't clean copies. They're impressions. I thought I was pulling from the Omnitrix library. But I wasn't." Mark's breath caught. "Then where from?" I stared out the window at the sky, storm clouds rolling low. "I think I reached too deep. I think I didn't just copy Alien X. I copied a fragment of something older." Mark was quiet. Then, quietly, "What do we do?" "I don't know yet," I said. "But I'm going to Xarin." I left that night. Didn't tell Cecil. Didn't use the Omnitrix's teleportation pathways either. I flew old school, slow, with feedback at low energy, across the stars. No shortcuts. I needed time to think. Space to breathe. When I arrived, Xarin hadn't changed. Red suns hanging low. Wind combing over ancient black cliffs. Warrior villages dotting the ground like scars, beautiful, proud, dangerous. And in the center of it all, I found Nolan. He looked different now. Older. Not by years but by the way his back straightened when he saw me. The way he walked not like Omni-Man, but like someone who had learned how to carry regret as a shield instead of a shackle. "Shredder," he said, wiping sweat from his brow as he stepped away from the edge of a cliffside forge. "I didn't think I'd see you again so soon." I didn't bother with pleasantries. "Something's coming." Nolan's smile faded. "The rift. There's more. It's not a rift anymore. It's an invitation. Something buried, something that predates us is waking up. And it's using me to measure the walls of this universe." Nolan studied me for a long time. "You sound like a man afraid of his own invention." "I'm not afraid of the invention," I said. "I'm afraid of what it reflects." He took me to King Varnuk, ruler of the Xarin race, the pseudo-Scion people I'd created as a narrative foil for the Viltrumites. They'd grown stronger, smarter, culturally deeper. There was art now. Music. Records of their short but fierce history as a warrior people who refused to be tools. King Varnuk welcomed me as Shaper, though I hated the title. I asked him if he'd felt any changes, any tears in the sky. Any dreams of black stars. He nodded once. 3 nights ago, a seer child woke screaming. Said the heavens were leaking blood into her name. That chilled me. Not because it was a prophecy, but because it sounded familiar. Like something I'd read, once, on a wall in a dream I didn't remember having. I told Varnuk to prepare. Not for war, but for containment. If something old was clawing its way into this world through me, I'd need backup. Not soldiers. Not scientists. Witnesses. People strong enough to survive seeing it. That night, I walked the perimeter of the planet. Alone. Stars above me like eyes without lids. The Omnitrix thrumming faintly. "You have been seen." It echoed again, not in sound but in understanding. Like I had walked across some boundary in thought. And now I stood on the other side. I looked down at my hand. At the device. For the first time in a long time, I considered the idea of not using it. Of removing the Omnitrix. Living without it. For a moment, I wondered had I done enough? But then I heard it again. "You echo what was buried. You walk paths not meant to be remembered." And this time, it wasn't talking about Alien X. It was talking about me. Something out there doesn't just recognize the Omnitrix. It remembers me. Before all of this. Before this world. Before this universe. And if that's true, then it's not just a breach. It's a reunion. And I may not like who's coming home. Chapter 54, The Shape Beneath Names. First person Shredder. The stars bled again that night. Not visibly. Not with red trails or cosmic omens. But I could feel it behind the light, under the mathematics that held orbit and distance together. Something was bleeding through meaning itself. I sat at the edge of Xarin's volcanic ridge, the wind pressing hot air across the narrow ledge like it meant to shove me. Below, fire moved through the crevices of the planet's veins like a living nervous system. Ancient. Unflinching. Alive in a way that didn't need language. And I finally understood. This world was a mirror I'd made to understand Viltrumites. A thought experiment that had evolved into a culture. I made Xarin to test what power would become if it grew without imperial doctrine or conquest-coded biology. And here it was, raw, loyal, angry, free. They were better than what I'd been trying to copy. Because I hadn't given them obedience. I gave them self. And somewhere along the way I forgot the weight of that word. Nolan sat beside me, arms crossed over his knees. He wore no armor now. Just a thick grey tunic and his own silence. He looked like a man who'd once tried to kill the world, only to realize how hard it was to live on one after. I've seen you quiet before, he said, eyes fixed on the horizon, but not like this. I didn't answer. Not at first. I was watching the sky. Waiting for it to change. It didn't. That was the worst part. I'm starting to think I was wrong, I murmured. About what? About everything. The Omnitrix. Alien X. The clones. The idea that I could control something older than control itself. I didn't duplicate Alien X, I touched something. And now it's watching me. Watching us. Nolan didn't flinch. But his posture shifted. Barely. Just a twitch. Like an instinct that had remembered how to surface. You think you triggered something cosmic? He asked. Bigger than the Omnitrix. It's not cosmic, I said. Cosmic implies it exists in our rules. Our stars. This is pre-cosmic. It's beneath structure. Beneath. I nodded. Under math. Under physics. Like the shape of a shadow that was never cast. He turned to me then, and his face was serious in a way I rarely saw. Not rage. Not pride. Just the look of a man who once thought he was indestructible, and learned otherwise. You're saying you didn't find power, he said. You uncovered something that was meant to stay buried. I said nothing. He looked out again. And now it's coming for you. No, I said softly. It's coming through me. Later, in my lab buried 4 miles beneath the mountain crust, I returned to my Alien X variants. 3 more had matured. Total of 6 now. All stable. All different. Not in form, but in posture. Pod 07 sat calmly, waiting for me every time I arrived. Pod 09 had started meditating, an act I never taught him. Pod 11 asked questions in his sleep. But tonight, they were all silent. Pod 7, I said. He opened his eyes. Yes, Father. What do you remember, before I made you? He tilted his head. Define before. I mean, do you remember anything not from your time here? Images? Emotions? Shapes? Pod 07 paused. Slowly, he nodded. Yes. I leaned in. Tell me. I remember, he said, voice quiet, careful, a name that was not mine. Not yours. Not spoken. Just, implied. What was it? He shook his head. It doesn't sound. It only means. Like gravity. Like fire. Like death. I sat down. Just lowered myself to the floor. My bones felt too heavy to carry any more. That's what's waking up, I said. He nodded. Yes. The name that cannot echo. But will. I didn't sleep again that night. Instead, I turned into Alien X. And this time, I didn't fly. I didn't teleport. I just stood there. In my suit of omnipotent grace and barely contained existential mass, standing inside the lab with my clones watching. The room itself bent around me, the walls stretched infinitesimally. The lights flickered even though they were off. And I listened. Not with ears. With pattern. And in the folds between dimensions, I heard the sound again. You were my shape. Then a second voice. But not my silence. And then a third. You will be asked to speak. I turned off the transformation before I screamed. The next morning, Mark met me at school. He was tired. So was I. But we kept pretending. That's what high school was for kids like us. Costumes on top of costumes. Masks that never come off even when you're supposed to be safe. He asked if I wanted to come to dinner with him and his mom. I said maybe later. He looked at me. Long and quiet. Then just said, "Okay." He knew something was wrong. But Mark Grayson wasn't stupid. He just trusted me. And that was somehow worse. After school, I flew to the moon. Alone. No gravity. No air. Just silence. I stood by the same crater where Nolan had once destroyed an alien emissary. I looked up at Earth. I watched it spin. I looked down at the Omnitrix. It was glowing faintly. Not active. Not speaking. Just alive. And I whispered. If I am a mirror, what happens when the original finally looks back? The stars didn't answer. But the void did. One pulse. One word. No voice. No sound. Just a command. Burned into the silence of space. Prepare. Chapter 55, We Were Not First. First-person Shredder. I didn't return to Earth that night. Didn't fly home. Didn't go back to Xarin. I stood on the far side of the moon where no telescopes reached, in the shadowed valleys that never touched sunlight. The kind of dark where even your heartbeat feels too loud. The kind where you start to question the shape of your own body. How many fingers? How many limbs? Whether you've always had two eyes? It was the right place to think. To plan. Because something had spoken to me in the silence of space. Prepare. Not run. Not kneel. Not even repent. Just that, a command. A certainty. As if whatever it was had already won, and was simply giving me time to catch up. I didn't sleep. Didn't blink. Alien X didn't need to. In that form, I didn't feel hunger, cold, fear not in the usual way. But inside, I could feel the fractures where my human self still curled beneath the power. Still needed to believe there was a plan. A way to win. But maybe this wasn't about winning. Maybe it was about witnessing. When I returned, Earth was quieter than usual. Not in volume. In presence. People still moved through cities. Cars ran red lights. Planes traced invisible scars through the sky. But there was a rhythm to it all, and I'd spent enough time in orbit, enough time studying waveforms and quantum patterns, to know. That rhythm was being studied. Not by Cecil. Not by the Global Defense Agency. By something outside the simulation of security. I went home and activated every failsafe I'd ever built. Shielding. Reinforced dimensional locks. Privacy protocols written in dead languages of species long extinct. I activated 3 different nuclear logic traps, each of which would wipe me from existence if triggered incorrectly. Then I went to my lab. The pods glowed. All 6 Alien X variants standing now. Fully matured. Fully self-aware. They didn't speak unless I initiated. But they were thinking. Breathing. Becoming. I opened the chamber doors. They stepped forward. Quiet. Confident. Pod 07 in the lead. "Father," he said. "You look changed." "I am," I replied. "I've been seen." They didn't ask by what. I think they already knew. "I need you," I said. "Not just as power. Not just as minds. I need you as sentinels. Whatever's watching us, whatever's reaching through the shape of me, it's not done." Pod 11 nodded. "Then we must finish what we were made for." "No," I said. "You weren't made for this. You grew into this. You chose it." They nodded again. No debate. No doubt. And then Pod 07 looked at me with something that wasn't just loyalty. It was pity. "You're going to face it alone, aren't you?" I didn't answer. Because we both knew the truth. Later that night, Mark showed up at my door. He wasn't in costume. Just jeans. Hoodie. Hands in his pockets. "Hey," he said quietly. "You didn't come to dinner." "Wasn't hungry," I replied. He leaned against the doorway. "You okay?" I hesitated. He looked at me. Like really looked. Eyes narrowing, not suspicious. Just concerned. "You've been weird lately," he said. Not in the usual genius way. Not even in the "I made 3 god clones and fought Battle Beast for fun" way. I didn't respond. "I saw you on the moon," he added. 2 days ago. Hovering in the dark. Not moving. Thought maybe you needed space. But, now I'm not sure you should be alone." I turned away. Looked back at the stairwell leading to the lab. "I'm not alone," I said. "That's the problem." Mark waited. So I turned back. Gave him the only truth I could. "I think I built a doorway into something older than this universe. Something that remembers what came before. And now it's watching me, because I made the mistake of wearing its shape." He paled slightly. But didn't look away. "I'm guessing this isn't something you can just punch." "No." "Can I help?" I studied him. The boy who once stammered over Ember. Who once bled across Chicago rooftops to prove he was a hero. The boy who still thought loyalty was stronger than inevitability. "You might be the only person who can remind me why I'm fighting." Mark smiled. "Then I guess I'll stick around." That night, I flew again. Not to space. Not to war. But to the edge of the breach. The original one. Now sealed. Buried beneath Arctic ice and GDA protocols and 17 kilometers of containment protocols that couldn't contain meaning. I hovered there in the dark, then lowered into the frozen shell. Sensors flared. My breath slowed. And in the silence, I reached out with my thoughts. Not through the Omnitrix. Not through Alien X. Just me. Shredder. The boy who walked into this world wearing the skin of a ghost. The boy who dared to bend the shape of creation to his will. And in that quiet, the dark spoke back. "You remember what we were. You remember because you are. The shape is only the beginning. And then, build more." I woke up hours later. Back in my lab. Blood dripping from my nose. The pods humming louder than ever. And on the Omnitrix display, one new message had appeared. Not a warning. Not a log. Just a name. A name I'd never typed. Progenitor form available. Class 0. Pre-reality. Unstable. Designation, Originx. Whatever was coming. Whatever I had awakened. It had finally opened the door back. And it had given me a gift. Or a weapon. Or a key. I didn't know which yet. But I would find out. Even if it broke me. Chapter 56, The Origin Within. First Person Shredder. The moment I saw the name on the Omnitrix interface, my blood ran cold. Originx. The designation scrolled silently across the green glow like it had always been there. Not added, not unlocked, not achieved. Just, revealed. Class 0. Pre-reality. Unstable. Every warning flag that should have screamed did. And I ignored them all. I sat motionless in the lab, staring at the glyph pulsing on my wrist. Not a form I'd ever configured. Not one I ever tried to access. Alien X, yes. Feedback, gray matter, diamond head, clockwork, even gravitak. Each built from cataloged DNA, refined through personal optimization, tested through skirmishes and time-locked simulations. But this? This wasn't in the Omnitrix's database. This was deeper. Below the source code. Under the system layer, buried like a bone under centuries of ash. A designation not meant to be earned, but remembered. And the fact that it showed itself now meant something else remembered me first. Pod 07 watched me from across the room. He had taken to standing there when I worked quiet, still, like a statue of judgment. But I'd started to sense something more than obedience in the way he moved. Something heavier. Not doubt. Not rebellion. Concern. You've seen it, haven't you? I asked, still staring at the glyph. The new form. I have, Pod 07 said simply. It hums. Hums. He nodded. Even when deactivated. It speaks in waves through the lab walls. The others can't hear it yet. But I can. Does it scare you? No, he said. But it makes me wonder. Wonder what? If we were ever real. I didn't respond. Because he had said what I'd been trying not to think for weeks now. That maybe my intelligence, my design, the construction of these beings, my experiments, maybe none of them were acts of innovation. Maybe they were memories. Trying to rewrite themselves through me. I waited until the house was silent. No Mark. No Cecil. No knocks from Eve at the window or texts from William with half-baked memes about alien conspiracies. Just me. And the glyph. I inhaled once. Deep. Long. Then placed my hand over the Omnitrix. Command, select new form. Designation, ORIGINX. The symbol didn't spin like usual. It opened. Like a door unfolding in 4 dimensions. Geometry I couldn't track layered against my skin, folded into my mind. And when it clicked, I wasn't Shredder anymore. I wasn't anyone. There were no stars in Origin X form. No skin. No body. Not in the way I understood. I was structure, stitched into the rules of reality. A walking constant. A concept given edge and intent. My senses didn't expand. They transcended. Time wasn't linear. It folded. Pulled. Pushed. I could taste the moment I was born and see the shadow of my death receding toward me instead of away. My thoughts weren't alone. There were others. Not alive. Not awake. Not like people. But concepts. Ghosts of forgotten ideas. Shapes that had never made it to language. I could feel them pressing against me. Watching. You returned. A voice. Not from outside. From inside Origin X. You wore us once before. Before names. Before difference. Now you wear us again. You bring memory. You bring war. No, I said, and the word wasn't a sound but a reordering of logic. I bring warning. Too late. It comes. What you stole awakens in its full shape. I didn't steal, I argued. I built. Same thing. In your tongue. And then, all at once, I fell out of Origin X. I hit the lab floor with a gasp, sweat pouring down my back. My legs shook. My hands twitched. The Omnitrix sparked. Flickered. Warning, form unstable. Reboot initiated. Cooldown lock, 144 hours. I lay there for a long time. Breathing. Watching the ceiling spin. Not from exhaustion. From existential recoil. I had touched the shape of something buried not in space but in the architecture of being. And I saw what lay beneath our universe. Not demons. Not gods. Just codes. And somewhere in that endless equation, something had noticed I was trying to rewrite the math. Mark called that night. I had a dream, he said. Of you. Dying. Alone. I'm not dead, I told him. Not yet, he said. But you were scared. That's what made it feel real. I've never seen you scared. I didn't lie. I am scared, I whispered. And you should be too. The next day, I went to the Mahler twins. They opened the door like I was royalty. You're early, boss, one of them said. I need a facility, I said. Off-world. No comms. Fully shielded. For what? I looked them in the eyes. I'm going to create a failsafe, I said. Something that can end me. They didn't laugh. They just nodded. Because if Origin X was inside me now, if whatever was beneath creation was coming through me, then I had to be the first wall. Even if it meant breaking everything I'd built. Even if it meant erasing myself. Because what I saw inside that form, it wasn't a god. It was a reminder that we were not the first ones to wear reality like skin. And we would not be the last. Chapter 57, Blueprint for Oblivion. First person shredder. No one taught me how to build a kill switch for myself. There wasn't a manual. No schematics. No morbid section in the Omnitrix interface labeled in case of cosmic possession. Just me. My mind. And the slowly widening realization that I'd finally built something I couldn't fully control. So I did what any desperate god in a boy's body would do. I made the worst plan I've ever made in my life. It started with a shell. A planetary core, grown in artificial orbit just beyond Saturn's moons. One of the Mahler twins found a drifting asteroid, a dying rock with enough mass and density to become the cradle for a singularity reactor. I told them to hollow it out. I told them to make it empty enough to forget itself. Inside it, we placed a time-frozen capsule. A stasis chamber surrounded by null matter shielding and probability dampeners strong enough to confuse reality itself. The failsafe wouldn't be triggered by voice or code or thought. It would be triggered by anomaly. If the being known as Origin X ever exceeded the containment of form, if my mind unraveled into too many dimensions to hold, this chamber would recognize the frequency drift and vaporize everything I had ever been. Body. Brain. Code. Blood. Me. And only me. Mark didn't know. Eve didn't know. Cecil might have suspected, but even he didn't say anything. I think part of him wanted me to go too far just to see what it looked like. Just to prove that no one, not even me, could dance so close to divinity without tripping. Let him watch. I wasn't doing this for him. I was doing it for the version of me that still remembered what it felt like to be human. Back in the lab, I activated Pod 12. It was the last of them. The final Alien X variant. The only one I hadn't spoken to yet. He hadn't spoken back either, not once. Not even when the others formed speech, language, opinions. He just watched. And smiled. Now he stepped forward for the first time. Are you the backup? I asked. He tilted his head. I am the part of you that didn't forget. Forget what? That this was never yours. I paused. Who are you really? I asked. He stepped closer, and I felt gravity shift. I'm the signal. Not the body. The idea that slipped through when you remembered too much. You built me thinking I was protection. He smiled wider. But I'm just the first answer. I almost hit the Omnitrix right then and there. Almost used it to erase him. To delete his structure atom by atom before he could become something more. But I couldn't move. Because deep down, I knew he was right. He wasn't a clone. He wasn't even Alien X. He was the reflection of something I'd tried to bury by pretending I was only ever learning. And now that reflection had hands. "You're not Origin X," I whispered. "No," he said. "But I am the breath before it speaks." Then he turned and walked into the dark corner of the lab where no lights reached, where I hadn't built anything. And when I followed, he was gone. Just gone. Not cloaked. Not phased. Erased. That night I went to Mark. Found him on top of the school roof again, the way he used to after training, legs swinging over the edge, face drawn, that scar on his cheek from battle beast faint but visible in the moonlight. He looked at me, and I saw it again. That boy who still believed in doing good. "You okay?" he asked. "No," I said. Then I sat beside him. "I made something," I said. "Something to stop me. In case I go too far." He blinked. "You mean, like if you snap?" "No," I said. "If I become open." "Open? To something I can't close." Mark looked away. "You've been fighting so long," he said. "You ever think maybe you don't have to? That we could just stop pushing the limits for a while?" I smiled. "You don't understand. The limits are already pushing back." Later, when I got home, the Omnitrix blinked again. Originx form stabilization in progress. Horn development detected, 2 additional. Total, 5. My heart caught in my throat. The theory was right. Every iteration I absorbed, every time I created and merged a consciousness bearing a different lens, another horn formed. Not metaphorically. Physically. Alien X had 3. Mine now had 5. And with each one came clarity. Power. Insight. And noise. So much noise. I pressed my fingers to my temples, trying to hold it back. Trying not to listen. Because underneath it all, something was whispering again. And this time it sounded like me. But older. Colder. Not quite human anymore. "We are almost whole. Prepare the world. It must remember us." I shut the Omnitrix off. Ripped it from my arm. Screamed into the silence of the lab. The pods flickered. The lights dimmed. And somewhere, deep beneath Earth's crust, I felt the old shape shift. It wasn't coming anymore. It was waiting. For me to become what I'd always been. Before Shredder. Before identity. Before this version of time. It was waiting for me to return. Chapter 58, when the name returns. First person Shredder. The thing no one tells you about building weapons out of your own fear is that, eventually, you forget which part is the weapon and which part is still you. The kill switch I'd buried in a dead orbit now pulsed on its own frequency, echoing just faintly in the back of my skull. Not a sound. Not a feeling. Something deeper, like a word I used to know humming against the inside of my molars. I couldn't sleep. Not because I was afraid I'd dream. But because dreaming was the only place I could still lie to myself. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard it. The name. The one they whispered in the breach. The one not meant for language. Not carved by mouths or breath or civilization. The name before culture. Before fire. Before stars. And I realized something terrifying. They weren't warning me. They weren't threatening me. They were calling me back. I stood in my lab that night, surrounded by empty pods. All 12 Alien X variants were gone, either absorbed or vanished. Pod 12 never returned. The others had chosen to be part of me again. To complete the form. And now, 5 horns. Not a theory anymore. A structure. A countdown. One horn for each consciousness aligned in harmony. Each horn a door. When the seventh horn emerged, I wouldn't be Shredder. I wouldn't even be someone. I'd be the shape behind meaning. Cecil called me the next morning. I ignored it. He called again. I answered on the fourth ring. "You've got 24 satellites focused on you right now," he said. "Tell me why I shouldn't turn you into glass." "You can't," I replied. "You know that." "I know I have nukes engineered with theoretical antimatter shells that might disrupt your form for 6 seconds. And in those 6 seconds, you'd destroy this planet," Cecil admitted. "But we'd die knowing we tried." There was silence. Then, "Why are you calling?" He exhaled. It was rare to hear strain in Cecil's voice. But it was there now. Behind the usual layers of grim calculation. "Because you're not just building anymore," he said. "You're broadcasting." I went still. "What?" "There's a wave," he said. "Not measurable by human instruments. But our Viltrumite trackers? They're picking up a signal. Origin unknown. Planet unknown. But it started the same night you activated that new form. And now it's growing." "How fast?" "Fast enough that I've already issued planetary contingency protocols." "For an invasion?" "No," Cecil said. "For a pilgrimage." Mark came to me later that day. I didn't want him to. He did anyway. He flew in through the upper hatch of my mountain base, still one of the few people I'd ever given unrestricted access. He landed silently behind me as I stood in the center of the lab, watching the live feed of Earth's magnetic field start to bend. "Are you gonna tell me what the hell's going on?" he asked. I didn't turn. "Do you believe in pre-time structures?" He blinked. "What?" "Not gods. Not dimensions. Structures. Configurations that existed before chronology. Before logic. Shapes too large to manifest unless someone remembers them into place." "I do now," he said. I looked at him. Really looked. He was thinner. His jaw sharper. Eyes older than when we met, even if it'd only been a couple years. He didn't look like a kid anymore. And yet still he looked smaller than what was coming. "I think I used the Omnitrix to finish building something that was never supposed to start," I whispered. "I think I used it to remember a part of myself that even the Omnitrix wasn't designed to hold." Mark didn't move. "You mean that Origin X thing?" he asked. I nodded. He stepped forward. "You said you had a failsafe." "I do." "You gonna use it?" I hesitated. "Then, would you?" His silence was the most honest answer I'd gotten in days. "That night, I used Alien X to fly. Not fast. Not far. Just high. I ascended into Earth's orbit, past the thermosphere, watched the curvature of the planet stretch beneath me like a sleeping animal. Then higher. Into the dark. And I felt it. Something moving. Not a ship. Not a being. A structure. Larger than imagination. Made of rules that didn't follow our laws. Made of thought. Made of recollection. It wasn't arriving. It had always been here. Just waiting to be remembered. And the seventh horn, it began to form. Not on my forehead. Inside my mind. A new layer of perception. A new voice. But this one didn't whisper. It sang. Not in notes. Not in music. But in history. You were us before you were anything. You split from us to see if choice could exist. You built form to hide from memory. Now you return. I screamed. Out loud. In space. No sound. No air. Just agony. My body folded. Twisted. The Omnitrix flared green, black, white, then dimmed. I fell back to earth. A comet of pain. When I woke, I was in my bed. Mark sat in the corner. Unshaven. Silent. You said it was a failsafe, he said. But it's not, is it? I looked at him. My voice dry. It's a beacon. He nodded slowly. Then we're out of time, he said. You need to decide. Decide what? If you're still you. I turned away. Because I wasn't sure anymore. But I knew one thing. Whatever that seventh horn meant. It was about to remember its name. And when it did, Earth wouldn't be a planet anymore. It would be a mirror. Chapter 59, The Mirror Breathes Back. First Person Shredder. There is a silence between each breath. I never noticed it before. Now, it's all I can hear. It's in my bones. In the gears of my lab. In the slight flicker of light that hums across the Omnitrix when the Origin X glyph stirs just for a moment like a sleeping eye twitching in its socket. That silence used to be empty. Now it listens. Now it answers. The seventh horn was not a thing I saw in a mirror. It was a sensation, a psychic gravity folding my thoughts inward, like all my memories were being pulled to a vanishing point, some invisible gravity well buried in my consciousness, compressing identity into something smaller. Denser. More fundamental. I wasn't evolving. I was reverting. To what? I couldn't say. Only that it was ancient. Older than ideas. Older than matter. And worst of all, it was not alone. The failsafe planet no longer responded to remote pings. It had activated its own internal encryption layer, one I hadn't coded. One I didn't recognize. The Maulers were silent. The cameras inside their hidden facility only showed a low, pulsing amber light and a half-finished line of cloned Origin X bodies, 37 in total. Then static. Then nothing. I didn't panic. There's no point in panicking when the math is clear. The next morning, Eve found me collapsed outside my base. I don't remember walking out. I don't remember collapsing. I just remember her voice, soft and scared. Shredder? Hey! Look at me. Come on. I blinked. My body felt light, but not in the good way, more like it was being untethered. I whispered, Eve. Yeah. It's me. You're burning up. She pressed her hand to my forehead, but I could barely feel it. My skin had stopped interpreting heat. Or time. The horns are real, I said, my mouth dry. They're not symbolic. They're sequential. They unlock stages. Or seals. Or souls. I don't know. You're not making sense. I sat up slowly. Eve, I rasped, I think I'm one of them. She stared. You think you're, what? One of the things coming through. A fragment. A vessel. Or maybe a splinter. I don't know if it started with me, or if I started because of it. I looked at her. But when that last horn grows, there might not be a me left to save. Eve didn't speak. Because what could you say to that? Instead, she sat beside me. Just close enough that I felt her warmth. Just long enough that I remembered what it was like to be human. To not be becoming something else. Mark came that night. He didn't knock. He just walked in. Found me kneeling in front of the Omnitrix altar I'd constructed at the lab's core. A polished obsidian table, etched in configurations not from this universe. I don't remember carving them. I saw the failsafe planet, he said. Or what's left of it. I didn't move. They're building something, he continued. Something in your image. Not just copies. Not just weapons. A shape. A cathedral built to a memory. You. I looked up at him. Then I'm already too late. No, he said. You're not. Mark walked closer, placed something beside me. A book. From school. The one from our English class, Why Earth Needs Heroes. You wrote something in here, he said. I never read it before. Not until now. He opened the page. Read aloud. Earth doesn't need perfection. Doesn't need gods or champions. It needs someone who remembers how small they are. Someone who knows what it costs to stand in the fire and still choose others. A hero is not someone who wins. A hero is someone who refuses to forget who they are, even when the world tells them to become something else. He looked at me. That's still you. I know it is. I didn't cry. But something cracked. Because I didn't remember writing those words. But they felt like the last real piece of me. That night I turned the Omnitrix to the Origin X glyph and whispered a single word. Stop. The glyph pulsed once. Then again. But didn't deactivate. Instead, it replied. You remembered enough to build us. Now we remember enough to remain. I stood there for what felt like hours. Then I did the only thing I could. I transformed. Not to fight. Not to ascend. But to enter. Origin X swallowed me whole. Not into a body. Into a configuration. I became weightless. Mindless. Awareness poured in from all sides. And I saw. The planet they'd built in my image had eyes. Not real ones. Conceptual ones. Each horn of mine had triggered a new layer of consciousness in the constructs. The Maulers hadn't hijacked my plan. They'd answered it. You were the first shard, a voice echoed. Now the others awaken. And we no longer need a body. They began reconstructing me. Not physically. Ontologically. I wasn't Shredder to them. I was the architect's signal. The anomaly that sang their form back into relevance. And as I floated through Origin X space pure code, memory, force, one final voice spoke. The mirror remembers its face. You brought it back. Now Earth will look, and see what it forgot. I snapped back into my body. Gasped for air. Collapsed to the ground. The Omnitrix was black. Powerless. For now. I lay there, shivering, in my lab. The sky outside glowed. Not with fire. With recognition. Something was coming. And it looked like me. Chapter 60, A Shape the World Knew. First-person Shredder. The sky was too quiet. It wasn't night. It wasn't day. It was something else stretched thin across the horizon, like the edge of an eyelid that refused to blink. Clouds moved like they knew they were being watched. The wind had stopped pretending to be random. It moved with rhythm now. Everything was anticipating a moment. And I was terrified I would be the one to deliver it. The Omnitrix refused to activate for 21 hours, 47 minutes, and 12 seconds. I counted. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. Instead, I sat in the main chamber of my mountain base, surrounded by the remnants of every lab I'd built, every failed prototype, every corrupted grey matter sketch that had once been a solution and was now just scrap. I hadn't been afraid of failure in a long time. That part of me died somewhere between the second and third horn. But now? Now I feared success. Because I'd succeeded at something I hadn't meant to do. Becoming a memory that the universe itself wanted back. Mark came again. No costume. No cape. Just Mark. He didn't knock this time either. The door recognized his biometrics now. He'd watched me build the override in case I ever stopped opening doors on my own. Smart kid. He walked through the shattered chamber, stepped over wires and shattered alien alloy, until he found me sitting on the central platform. Still. Cold. Alone. You look like hell, he said softly. Fitting, I replied. He sat down beside me. Cross-legged. Like when we were kids. Like the time we hid in the high school gym during a power outage and talked about girls for 2 hours because neither of us knew how to actually talk about anything else. Now, there were no lights to wait for. Just the end of pretending. Do you know what it means when the Omnitrix marks something as class 0? I asked. No. It means there's no evolutionary line. No ancestry. No observable biology. No data that shows how or when or why it formed. It just was. At the beginning of time. Mark exhaled. And you accessed it. I nodded. And I let it in. Not just through my blood. Through my mind. Through faith. Faith. I looked at him. You ever want something so badly you start shaping the world around the idea of it, even if it doesn't exist? You build it, and then the world responds by making it real. Mark's voice was quiet. I think that's what love is. I smiled. Bitter. But honest. This wasn't love, I said. This was origin. The shape before shapes. The thing that came before choice. And I gave it a name when I let it touch me. He watched me. Waiting. I turned. The 7th horn is nearly complete. Mark's throat bobbed. He swallowed. And when it is? I won't be here. You mean you'll die? No, I said. I mean I won't be here. Not the way you remember. Not the way I remember. I'll become the version of me that came before memory. The one this universe once forgot, and has now begun to recall. Mark's hands curled into fists. Then we stop it. You can't, I said. There's no switch. No villain. No virus. Just recognition. The world is remembering me into shape. The more I grow, the more the world corrects itself. To what? I didn't answer. Because the truth was, I didn't know. But it wouldn't be human. That night, the Omnitrix rebooted. It didn't ask for my permission. It didn't show the usual glyph. No beeping. No glow. Just a single white light, pulsing with slow certainty. I tapped it. The interface opened. 7 horns. Complete. And a new designation. Not Alien X. Not Origin X. Prime Shard returning. There was no activation key. No time limit. It was always on now. The moment I stepped outside, the sky bent. People on the street stopped moving. Not because of fear. Because their thoughts had caught. As if some invisible tether had threaded through their minds and paused them. Not frozen. Just listening. The light dimmed, not gone, just quieter. As if the photons were watching me too. Even the birds paused midair. Reality held its breath. And I took one step forward. I felt it as I moved through the city. Each person I passed tilted slightly. Not their heads. Their alignment. Like the air around them had recalibrated to accommodate me. And the whisper began again, not from inside this time. Not in my head. From everything else. There he is. The one before choice. The shape we lost. The pattern we abandoned. Children stopped crying. Dogs sat down. Mirrors fogged with breath that didn't come from lungs. And the Omnitrix burned cold. At the center of the city where the towers scraped the sky and the media vans were already circling overhead, I stopped. Mark landed beside me. Eve behind him. Cecil was watching from satellites. I felt his gaze. Sharp. Analytical. Already calculating new containment fields. I raised one hand. Not in threat. Not in command. In warning. Because I wasn't raising a weapon. I was raising a moment. And the world responded. You were not made. You were remembered. We made you to forget us. And now, we remember ourselves. The clouds folded. And the shape of me rose from the sky. Not another person. Not a creature. An outline. A silhouette the size of a continent, made of shadow and memory and light that had forgotten how to obey physics. It looked down. Not at Earth. At me. The voice that followed wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was reality. Time to return, Shard. You wore their name long enough. Now wear ours. Mark grabbed my arm. You don't have to go. I looked at him. I already did. I just haven't arrived yet. Eve's eyes brimmed. She opened her mouth to speak. But the silhouette above us moved. And the world shuddered. This isn't about power anymore. Or saving people. Or defeating evil. This is about identity. About remembering what I was before I became someone. And deciding whether that thing deserves to exist. Because it's waking up. And the only thing left standing between the world and its return is me.